All right. Well, I'm going live because it's 5:01. Time to go live. Hythloday is supposed to be in here. Where the hell are you, Hythloday? No, he said he had to go get a cup of coffee. He told me he'd be a couple minutes. So we're going to talk about various things. I published the link in the comments to this. If you click on that link, you come in. I forget how it works going on dock and going on air, but you can definitely go in without video and just be in the chat where we'll see it. We will not tend to see the comments. Well, I'm going live. It's 5:00. Oh, I see it was 5:02 by the time it actually started going through. I just had the YouTube page, so it's funny. It's like on a 1-minute delay there. So yeah, whatever. I'm going to work over here while we wait for Hythloday. Somebody has to come ask something or whatever. I'm working on a notebook over here. So this cell should go up. These are the user-controlled settings. So let's see, where did I put them? I threw them down here. We'll move this cell up. Let's say station name. Station name equals none, I think would be good. I'm working on a notebook that allows you to look at weather records that have been recovered. There's no viewers, but you know, in the future someone might be viewing. Let's see, where is he? His last chat to me was LJGKDF, so I hope he didn't collapse on his keyboard or something after we hung up. Station ID. Station ID. Seriously, what am I supposed to just talk to myself? I don't think so. That's what I normally do on videos, so why not now? Well, because I haven't prepared anything to talk about. We were going to talk about science. See, we got family activities. Today's the last day of the contract I'm working on. It's right here. Okay, this is Hythloday. And then, let's see, I put that in there, didn't I? Yeah, so that link should bring people to this call. Let's see. Oh, maybe not. Oh, that's right. I did the wrong one. Oops. That's the wrong one. I always make this mistake. Okay, sorry, you guys. I posted the wrong link in the comments, too, so I'll edit that. So I'll edit this. Put the right link. I put a link that goes to it, but just to the broadcast. Here is to enter in. And Hythloday says he's on his way in. And that's...
Yep.
Hello. Yes, sorry, I always do that. It has this link that I gave you, but it's just to the broadcast through Google+. Yeah, this is, you have to go up to the URL of the little Hangout window to get this link. I wish there was a way to just say, if it's public, broadcast that link, you know.
Yeah.
You know what? Now, I'm using Google Hangouts in my remote work, and one thing I noticed that's really cool is, like, you can have something on a on the calendar, and there's a video conference room. So like you could have a video conference room that's just a constant link that anytime it's empty, sure, it's shut down, but as soon as one person goes in, it starts up. It's always the same link, and that link, ideally, you would have a room like that. That's your, that's your regular, like.
Yeah. But it doesn't record, right?
No, those don't record. Yeah, I don't know if you can do that with Google On Air, but it'd be cool if you could, because there's a start and stop broadcast. So why not just let people go in, and then if somebody starts a broadcast, makes a video? How that would be so convenient.
Yeah.
But
it saves like minute taking, or the secretary can more accurately.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, you mean in the work context. Yeah, but I was thinking of something we could use, because I would like to do this regularly. Probably Friday is not the best. I was thinking Sunday, because when I think of scheduling a time that I could, put aside, Sunday's maybe a good day for it, for a day to say, here, I'll be home.
Don't commit to something that you can't, because there's family time and you have things, that way.
Well, the other thing is, if you and I... If we could find 2 or 3 people, we could just make sure that we do a schedule.
Oh, excellent.
Because people have to show up. It's hard. If it always takes the same person showing up, if you could rotate, that'd be cool. Because I think we really need philosophy and everything that we talk about. That means science, religion, all of these issues. Kind of a discussion forum. I think it's missing.
Harvest. Do you know Inventive Harvest?
I know the handle. I haven't talked to. I don't remember talking to you directly, Inventive Harvest. Thanks for coming in, though.
I thought I'd try this out. I've never really done one of these Hangouts before. Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I meant to leave a comment on one of your videos the other day, or earlier, should I say, because Pyro was going over some of his ideas of cooperatives, and I was thinking, I'd like to see yourself, Inventive, do an appraisal of communism or something like that, or perhaps Pyro's ideas on cooperative sort of businesses.
I like cooperative businesses. I've seen a bunch of Pyro videos. I subscribe to him. I think he's interesting. I kind of first got turned on to Hythloday when Pyro and Hythloday were talking about this philosophy thing. It's the Gödel's liar paradox deal. And so I started watching that, and that's how I kind of got interested in you guys. I'm a big fan of cooperatives. To me, like, there's the economics people are always trying about getting to some place where the marginal benefit equals the marginal cost, right? And through increased competition, we'll get there. The buyers and the sellers will, through competition, get to this point of efficiency. Where I like the consumer cooperatives, not as much as the employee cooperatives or worker cooperatives, but like the consumer cooperatives where the consumers are the owners of the company. Well, then what do those consumers want? They want a good product for a good price. So it kind of doesn't even have the math problem. It just does it.
Yeah, no, but the thing is, so I pulled up this Mondragon thing because specifically, I think a big thing we have to do is producer cooperatives. This is exactly the issue. Like, I saw a lot of cooperatives growing up in the 70s, and all the baby boomers were trying these co-ops, and a lot of them just turned into Whole Foods type stores, because somebody works harder than somebody else, or somebody contributed the property and it goes back to them. And I think part of the problem is that they are struggling on this consumer end of the market, and you really have to get on the producer side, right? We have to have, so like Mondragon, they make refrigerators and Walkmans and these kinds of, sort of generic level industrial goods, and they do it as producers and have a producers cooperative, with the key part being that they started their own bank, to fund their endeavors in the 70s. So
Have we gone live now, Pyro?
Yeah, we started off live. I went live at 5. You were just late.
Right. Well, come on. It's no...
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I did give you a hard time. You'll see in the replay why you weren't here. But then I admitted that you told me you were getting some coffee, so everybody knew you were really not actually late.
That made me laugh, because I was trying to get on, and you said, "Oh, hang on, he just sent some gibberish last time I spoke with him, and he's not died at the desk or something."
Yeah, well, it could happen.
Yeah, there's the thing with the cooperatives is I wonder whether it doesn't become an us-only club, insofar as you know, you say, right, we own this, and we've got this we've got, say, 10% or 80% market share in whatever business, and what happens, I worry, is, or may happen with this Madragon or whatever it was called, in the future, is you say, right, we've set this up, we've got all these employees, and then you have a decision to expand and aggressively, to go for market share, to grow your business, and perhaps maybe reduce some of your features, terms and conditions, and things like that. But you've got a decision. You can go one way or the other, and because they own it, they will vote for not the best strategic economic decision. They will look at and say, well, I'd rather this business fund my existence and my family's existence and my friends and stuff, and shrink over the years, as long as I'm all right, and I've got my pension, I've got my high salary, I've got my involvement. But all the time, the way market forces can work is they can be undermining that market position, and rather than them choosing to feel that economic pressure of, Luke, you need to be more efficient, that means either cut jobs or blah blah blah, they say, no, we'll shrink a little bit, and and they become a happy insular crowd to themselves, and maybe it won't work out. That's my fear and intuition.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, I see that can happen, but it sounds more like what happens when you have the union as a separate antipodal organization to management. It's different than when you have just a cooperative in the first place. So I don't know what to say as far as that, but I mean, Mondragon, the reason they're such a great example is they started in the 50s. They were from the Basque region. They were economically suppressed by Franco, and then they, since then, Spain has gone through various stages, but never had an actually good economy, though it had some some credit generated booms, I guess, recently and stuff that collapsed, and they've survived during this whole process, selling internationally and expanding internationally. They've had a problem with other kinds of accusations of being insular, like they prefer to hire Basque people rather than other Spaniards or whatever, and there's other issues like that. Well, maybe it is cultural. The Basque have a work ethics, so they don't fall prey to the same kinds, allegedly, of problems that you have in a cooperative business, where, yeah, if you're in a big cooperative business, it is true that people could say, well, we could risk it all and everything will end, or let's just shrink, sell some of these assets, and I'll make it through 20 years and retire, and kind of screw over the long term of the infrastructure of this business as a way for your children to make money. So, but it hasn't happened to them. So they definitely get to, they're fully active, multi-billion-dollar company doing, modern convenience, all kinds of goods now, but mostly these consumer goods and stuff. And so they're a good example of how you can do it when you're in a, in the Spanish economy for the last 50 years. That's pretty something impressive about them doing it from, they're not just
They're a
living off of the
worldwide
riches of their country or something. What?
they're a worldwide company, right? I mean,
They are, yeah, but they,
so they can't totally be insular in terms of, but it makes me wonder how they're paying the Brazilian comrades in arms, and
yeah.
whether they're paying um, a, a living wage, and they're getting away with living wages and bare minimums, whereas the Bath people are getting a premium part.
Yeah, but that's an interesting thing there because that's an issue. So as they expand, they also cannot really institute. They buy some company, let's say, so they make refrigerators. So let's say they buy a Brazilian refrigerator manufacturer. It's hard legally as an international issue for them to convert this Brazilian company into something compatible. It's Brazil law, not Spanish, so they can do it, but it's like starting from scratch. Okay, how do we make the same kind of organization but with Brazilian institutions and laws overseeing us? But it's the Basque employees, the Spanish employees are not a force that's like, well, let's just pay us well, let them have their capitalist oriented system, and no, they are the ones insisting that these problems be solved and the money be spent so that they are cooperatives, and they actually have a self-interested reason to do so. They are still just workers, most of them, right? Most of these people in Mondragon are working in that factory. They don't want to compete with a Bangladeshi wage. They don't want another division to be making refrigerators at that kind of wage. They'd rather see somebody in Bangladesh paid Spanish wages and be able to compete and cooperate, therefore. So now, I think the main thing in Mondragon's case is, okay, it's one case. How many of these do we have? Well, we don't have a lot, but in the U.S. we do have some not-for-profits. The credit unions. I don't know if what it's like with credit unions or banking in the UK, but we have credit unions which are not-for-profit banks. They're way better than regular banks. It's not a co-op exactly, but it's a little bit. It's made as an organization of its members, and we have a few basically corporations that look like normal corporations that are actually giant not-for-profits, like AAA, which is the Auto Club, and Kaiser. Actually, I think Geico even is. I should look that up, but I think Geico is a not-for-profit, and it shows you how you can have a company. Let me double check that so I don't misrepresent.
You're fine. You're allowed to make the odd mistake.
Yeah, but I'm curious.
Yeah, a lot of those are the types of cooperatives I'm kind of talking about, where like the credit unions don't have like a bunch of members that own the credit union and shareholders that want to have it profitable. The members are the people that put their money in the bank, and so there's some
No, not Geico,
board.
sorry.
There's some board that makes decisions for the bank, but they're elected by the people that put the money in the bank. So the bank does what you want to do with it, rather than what someone else wants to do it. So
Yeah.
Sure, I do want my money to get a return, but I also like it to stay in the community and that kind of stuff. And I'm willing to sacrifice some of the interest rate on the money to have that money do something that fits with my values. Does that make sense?
Totally. I mean, that's the thing with the credit unions, and there's actually some advantages to banks. They can compete with each other, but that's the thing about the credit unions. They're a lot like banks. They're prone to the same temptations, right? They're prone to turning away somebody that could really use a loan but doesn't qualify this or that. They might frustrate you the same way as a bank, but in the end, yeah, that board of directors, they are beholden to their members, and there is a limit to how far they'll push the rules that is not there with a regular bank. There's a limit when it comes to crazy derivatives or skirting the rules or just that basic premise. Even though you still got people graduated from the same schools, there's people with the same economic theories, it's still, when it comes down to, there's a point at where there'll be an ethics, and those people are there realizing that they actually do answer to their members, and not just to put, so they, in the end, it's less likely and that they will, rob their actual depositors to make profits for somebody else because, oh yeah, they really are officially owned by their depositors. And if things get really bad, their depositors can probably, I don't know what the legal things are, but there's ways to go ahead and have like the equivalent of a shareholders meeting. So anyway, Geico is not for profit. That's a wrong one. I was thinking that because it was a government insurance agency, but it was always private. So just to clarify. But there are some examples like that.
There's a sporting good company called REI that has lots of good stuff, and if they also sell to non-members.
Right.
But if you're a member, you get a discount, and there's no shareholders that are like just in it for the money. The big problem with these kind of cooperatives, though, is that there's no incentive for someone to go build one, right? So the formation of new cooperatives has a problem there.
Yep.
That's what I would want to. I think you answered a lot of the initial criticisms pretty well, and that Mondragon, I think on the thing, had been established since 1972 or something. I think.
No, 50s.
Yeah. Anyhow, and it's grown fairly well because they have looked it over in the past when we've talked about it. But the other thing I would say is, well, yeah, all right, I can see the values and the principles and agree a lot, but I'd say, well, why advocate for cooperatives? Why not advocate for more governmental regulation in alignment, mandated throughout, rather than just sort of wishing for more cooperatives? And like as Avis has said, that it's kind of, there's little incentive. Since it's the values and the game as it's set up that we have an issue with, why not legislate essentially for cooperative structure? That would seem more.
I think that maybe we should.
Well,
create some kind of institutional framework that's more based off of a cooperative market than a free market, and kind of say, maybe we're going to tax LLCs more to where it's not to kind of disincentivize for-profit businesses and kind of and incentivize cooperative businesses more. It's tricky to come around all the problems of like, well, who's going to build all those cooperatives and whatnot, but I think you can't test it. We've got these ideas of, well, if we built this society this way, then it sounds like it'd be pretty cool, and the only way to find out is to actually build one, and then usually find a lot of problems where it goes wrong.
Well, I read the first statistic. Sorry, that's. Who's the guy now? I forgot his name. He's one of my favourite economists. But he was drawing attention to the fact that the unskilled worker wage, is skewed. China is down here, we're up here. And for example, I like to imagine myself as a US citizen, really, because it's like the main play area, so to speak. But would the US really legislate for values in their businesses, like the constraints, when then they're a major exporter of a lot of technology, at the risk of China and the EU then undercutting you? And you would find that all your, and this is the problem, you see. What I found is when confronted with that disparity of the unskilled worker wage, the reality is, I think, the West's lifestyle has to drop for parity. I believe that.
I don't.
If you want a short-term fix, it does. I think if you wanted to radicalize politics in the next 5 years and change economic structure, I think I think the belief. Go on, sorry. No.
I disagree. I object.
Yes.
No, and I think that's something everybody says, and it's sort of like part of this this issue of that the solutions are actually simpler than that. I mean, look, Africa is almost entirely undeveloped. Do you think we might be able to build a few farms in Africa, or develop, you know, that we're getting minerals there? And China's already started this development. So how do we share an equal standard of living? I think it's a done thing. It's called industrialization. Now it has problems with the environment. Well, the solutions to that are, we know, don't take so much profit out of your mine and keep the mine clean, and you can mitigate the problems. Now, why aren't we doing that now? Well, I guess it's because the top 0.1% is so fucking wealthy that they don't want, they could still be super wealthy and share some of the hundreds of millions keeping rare earth mines clean, and to make the rare earths a little bit more expensive, but we'd have more money to spend on the gadgets that, you know, would be more expensive to begin with. So, you know, I think that we can, it's development. If you develop infrastructure, people are of value. They produce value. You just have to enable that.
I got the criticism I made was a pragmatic problem about what we discussed in legislating for more cooperative values, and I suggested that it might be an undermining problem in terms of the US's basic economic, not efficiency is the wrong word, productivity, yeah?
Yeah.
And what you said strikes to me as very powerful and agreeable in many ways, but one of the problems is autonomy and self-governance of that African nation, you see. Yeah. And so, given the initial criticism about the US deciding to put values ahead of economics, bare market economics, I mean, I am leaning towards you and legislating, what's the word? It's not the right word. Controlling.
Well, see, here's the thing that's a huge thing that I can't see getting solved, but has to get solved. That's just going to be like one of the things where you have hundreds of years of inquisition, and then people go, yeah, that wasn't a good idea. Plenty of people knew at the time. Is this immunity from prosecution, the limited liability aspect of corporations, and they're private. And ultimately, you'd be better off incentivizing cooperatives by saying, look, if you have more or less a democratic constitution for your company, hey, you still got a president, he could still fire other people, whatever. It's not like it's all equal in there, but there's a constitution, and it's passed as, okay, look, this counts as a cooperative. This is an organization of the people that, you know, work there. They could have limited liability. They could say, look, if we break the law, it's that guy that decided to break the law, he goes to jail. And if you want to be a private company and you pull some shit like DuPont, or buy a company that, you know, that pulled some shit like Union Carbide, then you're going to jail because you're private. Forget the limited liability. You said you wanted to do this as an individual. You said you wanted to take responsibility for every employee at this company so that you could take $1 off of all of their dollars so that you could be richer. That's a risk you took, but you don't get limited liability. Now, is that likely to happen? I think eventually it has to happen. This whole limited liability corporations or people bullshit it's right next to the banking fiasco as to why we are, like, just by the short hairs still enslaved no matter how much iPods we got.
I agree that that's a great criticism, and probably in the very near future an aspect of business life that may well get reformed, but I don't think that answers the problem of you know, the potential threat to product, you know, to interfering with markets, regulating. That was the word I was looking for. I believe we can. I think there's a place to regulate, that will be all right, and it won't cause a crash in lifestyles.
Well,
but the point is there's a recognition that if you go too far, that Africa, Asia, and Europe will be saying, wow, they've just basically reducing the productivity. And we're now more efficient because we're prepared to work 50 hours, and they've decided nobody needs work more than 30 hours. So we instantly have an economic advantage. And so I'm just thinking that it's difficult to get to realize these value dreams.
But see, some of the things you're talking about, like the nature of the worker to sort of not be an entrepreneur about it. Well, I mean, at Mondragon, I believe they have examples of everybody took a wage cut. You know, because when you really are a part owner, you can say, yeah, I'll make less this year. Why? So we can put in the bank, we're going to make it through the next couple of years that are forecast to be difficult. So I think they have a good record on that. But anyway, in general, I think we need to carefully, in all of these situations, separate out which is the transition problem. Taking workers from our culture and putting them in a cooperative, how would they react? Well, they're so exhausted they might just collapse and say, finally my boss isn't an asshole, I'm going to take advantage. They might, but that's a transition problem. Right, you got to identify that different from, like in physics, what would be the steady state problem? The steady state situation is that if you know that your retirement is really a retirement and your company really is looking out for everybody, not because you're special, but because that's how it works, you're one of the owners, and that all works just like a stock owner knows that the company's supposed to be looking out for its interests, then you're willing to sacrifice more. You're not from our economy and our culture where sacrificing means you're going to get raped.
I think exactly. I think you've summed up the problem. Is everybody understands? This is game theory. Sometimes there's game theoretic outcomes that everybody can see is the best outcome, but because of the nature, nobody can transit to those best outcomes.
Because we know what environment we're in. Yeah, you need to be reaccustomed to. Yeah.
But the problem is, as you said, is the transition, and that's what I'm pointing to, I guess, is the pragmatic problem of getting the transition.
Yeah, and the transition can be deadly, right? So it's far from a menial thing. I mean, I think the huge problem is the transition. I mean, years ago, I did a thought experiment. I like to write stories for this kind of stuff of, well, what would be this ideal environment? And, and then second from that is, how could you possibly get there? How could the people losing power not use their last dollars to buy bullets and kill you? How could that, and that really is a barrier, and it should be a barrier in the sense that if you think about, politics and war and just the struggle for survival, yeah, if people see their survival or their advantage going away, they're going to use their last resources, stopping the whole game from going forward, and that's an actual, like a law of physics. You might, if that's really insurmountable, it's insurmountable and you need another way. So I don't know. I think that the gradual thing is to create cooperative style companies and have them cooperate on a more or less even playing field with the capitalist ones. Though, to be entirely honest, you're also trying to change the legislative situation. Like, for example, when you brought up this, how can you regulate this stuff? I mean, that's pretty much my most socialist communist side at this point, is that I could get support. I would support maximum, incomes, maximum gross wealth, a lot of things that would sort of regulate how much repository that are certainly in the United States, really not even controversial. They're not even discussed.
You win one. I'm convinced, Pyro. I am convinced that cooperatives, we need more of them to aid in this transition, because I'm thinking about it, they would aid the transition by acclimatizing population as more increase to the concept of the values over the raw economic benefit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we need to acclimatize people to this kind of thing, because we're talking about all workers are important. Right now, the worker is forced to work on Saturday because of a milestone. They're not sure if it's a really important one or not. But if they knew it was a really important one, well, we have to go to a world where they're going to actually sacrifice of their own free will their Saturday night, weekend bread and circus is part of this formula. They have to, of their own free will, sacrifice that and work, because sometimes you do have to work on Saturday. So how do we get into that framework with that person? I think most people are willing to work on that Saturday if they realize it's really important. Right now, they're disconnected from the importance. Their boss just bosses them around. If it's important or not depends on if the boss is smart or not, or why he's making them do it. And so it's a hard transition to get to where people that they're still going to be working class, they're still going to want their party time, they still don't necessarily love every aspect of their job, but some sacrifice might be called from upon them that used to be forced by the whip of their boss, and they're going to have to want to do it on their own. Is that possible? I've wondered in my own case, would I really work this hard if I didn't have a boss, saying, oh my God, everything's going to hell unless we work that hard? Well, now I'm 47 and I know that I would. It's just that I have to find things I think are important. So, but I don't know. I think that's a hard transition, and you can't imagine that this cooperative is going to happen. Everybody's going to be rich, and all the decisions are easy somehow. No, there's still be years where you're struggling, and you have to work hard, and you don't get paid a lot for your work. It's just to survive. And how do we trust each other enough to make those kind of decisions when we're in groups of 1,000 people working for a company? And I do think it's solvable, though. And I think Mondragon's a good example, one of our only ones, but we really need to try, a lot of companies. And that's the other thing, is that this, what you said, inventive harvest, is that I think a big part of it is in this culture, it's really hard to start a business and you're trying to make a livelihood because you have to. It's hard at that point to say, hey, now I'm going to release control of this business of mine to employees. You know what I mean? How do you know that their vision is right for that business? How do you know you're still going to be making money in 10 years? Maybe you've got the formula right. Now you're going to release it to a democratic process. That's a really scary thing. Even for people that want to do it, it's like by the time you have a working enterprise, and it's so hard, and you get certain things just right that you think are key to it, to let a bunch of people by committee vote on it, it's very difficult and dangerous, and you can't just let them vote randomly. You need like a constitution, and what are you? You're an expert in your business, not in, political theory. So it is a very difficult thing, and we need to look at models like Mondragon and say, well, how did you do it? You guys had over 50 years had to face all these little issues. I'm certain you have a solution, if not the best one. And but we're at a threshold where, yeah, it takes a lot of bravery. I mean, I know if I get my business going, I really, I trust myself to try to institute one of these things, but, I could be caught on,
you're going to be sat there smoking big fat cigars, saying, get to work!
I think, I was going to say that it is hard to start these cooperatives. Sometimes they do what Pyro was describing, where there's a business and the business owner just wants to retire, but he kind of wants his business to keep going, so he kind of, he'll have the employees or whatnot take a loan from the bank and buy it for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so converting a business is really just down to financing. They have to
that's
work
true.
together
Yeah. That's
and
an
get the financing, and then a business can change from an LLC to a cooperative.
Like United.
But a lot of them, like I think Mondragon, started as a cooperative, and I think that's what's hard is to have someone that's out there like, hey, I want to start a cooperative, and it's not going to make me rich, but I just think it's something to do. I think that people aren't. I just don't see why I've had friends that have done that. He started a cooperative grocery store in New Orleans just because he thought it was the right thing to do, and he spent like 3 years of his life doing it, and in the end it worked, and he's his cooperative grocery store, and he can feel really great about himself, but that's kind of all he gets.
Limited, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think that's really, really important. And if you can change things locally so that the people in your neighborhood are affected, then, that's a major, major win, bigger than sometimes, things that seem more flashy. But yeah, well, it's more resilient. I think if you actually build this company structure so that it's designed to be a cooperative, makes it harder to convert back, because like you had United Airlines that was employee owned, and literally all the employees and the pilots had a huge, had a disproportionate control, and this was all good, and it failed more or less. I was talking to this one United pilot. He said he thought it failed, at 9/11. They were, and the thing is, their structure was primed to the reason. It wasn't a cooperative. It was just a regular company where all the stock was held by employees who had done this thing you were talking about, financed that, made it really easy for when the stock price went down and there was a crisis in the industry to buy it back. So it got reprivatized, and it was either that or go out of business. So on the other hand, I've talked to a couple pilots at United about that era, and they thought it was a lot better. And people were getting paid better, and it was a period of good service and stuff, whereas right now United is like a laughing stock. I mean, it's just terrible how bad United has gotten. Like, you won't even don't even count on arriving at your destination. But I'm not saying that's the privatized part, but that's just what's happened to United. So yeah, starting them is it's the hard part, and because ideally you would have a way, like a kickstarting kind of thing. And actually some of this crowdfunding is a way to do it, because now you can go ahead and invest and get stock in a non-public company. And like Maine has a law where you can do that, and maybe that's a way to start off where you're in service to the people that are either your customers or your workers, or ideally both.
How do you feel about the statement that a country's standard of living is related to its productivity? That's very tightly related to its productivity. Would that ring true for you, Inventive and Pyro? That's a conception I have, and it's this nagging worry about all these seemingly simple approaches to fix the ills of the world, that it seems a hard truth in a world where we interact by trade and we have autonomy between countries. It might not be the right thing in a way, but I have it in my mind that as a clear principle that of understanding that a country's standard of living is very tightly related to its productivity. Is that true, Inventive?
I guess it depends on how you define standard of living. So, there's problems with GDP as a measurement where BP dumps a bunch of oil in the Gulf of Mexico, and then they clean it up, and that creates a lot of economic activity, and it's not getting us even back to the baseline. But more, what you're really trying to get at is happiness, perhaps. And there's these studies. This guy Daniel Kahneman, who is a sociologist, but got published in a lot of economics papers, because back a number of decades ago, like in the 60s or maybe 70s or something, maybe 80s, I'm not sure, but he did a study called The Economics of Happiness, where he called people all over the world, did a survey, and asked them, how happy are you, right, on a scale of 1 to 10. And this caused big ripples in the world of economists, because people in less developed countries reported themselves to be happier than people in more developed countries. People in less developed countries would be an 8 or a 9, where people in more developed countries would be like a 7 or a 6 or something like that, right? So this caused big ripples. Like, a lot of economists, fought this idea. They're like, this, it really kind of shakes the whole science to its core here if we accept this as truth. So they tried to falsify it. They got involved with things like MRI scanners and asked people, put them in an MRI scanner and ask them how happy they are. I see you've got your hand up, Hythloday. It's cool. So then they also would ask people that they know, be like, okay, we'll ask John how happy he is. He says he's in a 7. And then they ask people that know John, well, how happy is John? They're like, well, he's about a 7. and to see that people were honest about how happy they were, and there was this problem. And we've come to terms with that in some ways. It's not as simple as it seems. So I'll just pass it over to Hythloday. I think I've talked for a while.
Right. Just to clarify, since I know it's like my mum used to say, right, we should have communism and socialism, and she'd say things like, well, we have to educate people to understand that that's the right thing to do. And it's like the third world are, you know, got different values and culture that allow them to field rice, you know, chop rice all day in the rice fields of China and say, yeah, I'm really happy, perhaps.
Well, if you can do that, then
let me just clarify the definition. What I'm saying is since I see it as a problem that we're the advanced country and they're the lower country, and about the potential for us to have to drop our standard of living, what I would say is it's reasonable to put forward a definition that a Western economy would see as a standard of living. And what I mean by that then is not GDP, but material goods, keeping up with technological updates, and length of, you know, access to education, medicine, you know, and material goods.
Yeah.
And I think that's related heavily to not to GDP, but to
I don't know. Isn't it better to cook on?
productivity.
I don't know either.
I thought it was.
Sorry, I was out loud. I was talking to my wife. Sorry about that.
Oh, right. So you don't know was to your wife?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was just talking to my wife. So, but I was listening to you up until that point, and then now she asked me a question.
Well, I thought it was a firm economic principle from a Western perspective that you know, that you do, if in terms of productivity, then, you know, the nation will not have on average the lifestyle of a Westerner. You know, multiple cars, mobile phones, multiple computers, multiple TVs, all this kind of thing. You can argue for the value of it, but the fact is the change, if you want to say, but that's not true happiness, you'd have to argue and say, anyway. So.
Well, the thing is, I mean, the fact that it's not, that consumer bliss is not actually happiness is one issue. The issue of whether or not we could actually even afford on this planet for people in Africa to have all of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the cell phone penetration in Africa already. If we built cell phone factories in Africa, yep, we could have plenty. So, I mean, but it is a bigger issue that obviously that isn't the path to happiness. And I would argue that people like to be productive. I mean, I have managed teams of people before, and you know, I've had really good experience with those teams based on this theory that everybody can do something productive to the team. And, you know, some people are good at things and they like to do them. Some people are good at things they don't like to do. And so if you have them do some of the good things they like to do, and they're willing to do some of the good things they're good at that they don't like to do, and the things that really bug them somebody else doesn't care for, but it's not their pet peeve. And I tend to think that all works out, and that people want to be productive, and you more or less just have to create a situation where it's easy to be productive. You know, I believe if we had public tool labs, tool spaces, you know, machine shops, like to work on your car and stuff, that you just go in and you rent it for a few minutes, you'd find out the 10% of kids that are motorheads, and they'd be freaking car geniuses, and they'd make a living fixing everybody's car, and all you have to do is enable it. Now, everybody wants to do something productive. Maybe too many people want to be artists, you know, so you have to deal with, okay, you'd be better at plumbing, then we don't want to, your paintings suck or whatever. You know, there's an issue there.
Exactly. That is where I want to come in, because there's the issue of, I mean, the US and the Western economies are very well developed and got many sectors. Now, the criticism I would have of what you just said is that it seems you don't think globally in a way, because there's the concept of, I think the term is is it marginal benefit or something like that? And what it's saying is, you look, if your land is the world needs rice, yeah, and your land's great for making rice, it says you'll lot be pretty much your lot be rice farmers, yeah. And so this kind of idealized sort of talk that you give, it seems to forget about this marginal benefits that is working on a world scale, and that, you know, maybe everybody doesn't get the choose. You know what I mean? How would you like to be told?
It's comparative advantage. What is the term you're trying to?
Yeah. I was looking for that comparative advantage. Yeah.
So yeah, when there's comparative advantage, you know, we're all kind of better off doing our own things. Like we produce more when we take advantage of comparative advantage, but then we're gonna, you know, kind of institutionalize inequality that way, where there will be countries of rice growers. And I think Pyro's right when he's talking about the relationship between productivity and happiness, right? Where Russia's a lot more, you know, free market now than it used to be, and people complain about it. They're like, you know, hey, back in communism, we got to hang out with our families all the time, and drink vodka. Now I can't drink vodka like a madman because I have to work when I go to work. And now, you know, we don't share toilet paper anymore. Back in the day, you know, there'd only be so much toilet paper to go around, and we have to share it with our neighbors, and it gave us this community spirit. We were all a lot happier back then. And then you ask them, well, do you want to go back to the old way? And they're like, no.
No, we like watching TV.
Right. So, well, what it is that we don't in developed countries, we don't value happiness as much anymore. We more value productivity.
Right.
Well, and so if you ask us, hey, are you happy? You know, we're going to be like, I don't want to be happy. I want to be productive.
Well, okay. I mean, I think part of this is we rescale happiness. Like, we are happy, and then we just take it for granted. And so, you know, we normalize. It's like the sense of smell. If there's a stink long enough, you get used to it. If there's a pretty smell, you'll get used to it. You know what I mean? And then you just take advantage of it. So, I mean, I think that's got to be some of it, is that we're comfortable and we're just not really going, you know, we can't compare this other situation that we've never been in of discomfort and not having this, you know, indoor hot water kind of thing. I mean, I just saw a thing that still India is supposedly like 70% of the people. This might be a bad statistic. I think it was a recent thing I was watching of, and I thought it was better than that by now. Of India, you know, people shit outside. Just find a place to shit outside. You know, I mean, that's a pretty severe lack of infrastructure.
Do you not think, though, if we're thinking worldwide, fixing the world's problems, you know, we've got a problem of feeding everybody and getting some basic things, and that we actually need to press the productivity and be utilizing the productivity pressures of markets and what was it called again? Marginal
comparative
advantage. Yeah, I was stuck on that word.
So, well, I wanted to say something on your thing there. I do have a solution.
I understand and I aspire to all these happiness concepts and think we can educate it out. But in a world where people are living on $1 a day and, you know, many people starve if the rain doesn't come, and you know, children are dying, you know, people having big families because so many of the children aren't getting past 4 or 5 years old. I think it's a real future lofty goal to imagine this realignment of happiness beliefs, you know.
Well, I mean, the thing is, going back to your question about, you know, what about people that are in a rice-producing region? Well, my experience is that people are willing to do rote work and stuff, and they'll zen out on it and learn how to enjoy it. They'll sing a song. They'll smoke some pot before they do whatever, you know, they'll do a good job and just zone out. They'll zen out on it. But there's, you know, you can only do that, you know, 20, 30 hours a week. So what if we make a compromise? If people only have to do 20 hours a week of work in the rice field, and then the rest of the time is them having a moderately Epicurean, you know, they get to buy the food that they really like, and they get to some recreation, and most people will accept that deal.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And they'll be on YouTube, and maybe they'll turn out to be the best musician ever on their, you know, and they'll do that totally out of love, and they'll like that just as well. So I think we need to use some of this top 0.1%, the money that's going to them, to fund the fact that really, how about full-time work week is 20? Now I'm working hard. I still want to work 100 this week. Don't prohibit me from doing that.
You said as much in your recent video, and I agree with it. You said 30 hours, you know, and having a bit of free time and this, that, and the other, and yeah, I think, you know, if somebody said, you know, Luke, it's not panning out. You want to be a scientist working in CERN, but look, 20 hours in the field, carry on your, you know, you're studying. You know, I'd do that for society. But I still think the problem is we're not thinking. You know, there was something mediating about the idea of and facilitating the change about the ideas of cooperatives. But it's not and you know, I'm talking about if it was solely done changing the values through cooperatives to change happiness and the way it looked, I'm thinking, you know, 100, 200 years, yeah, if that was our only idea. And I just think there's a bigger world problem about imposing some of those ideas you just said as, yeah, well, they can work 20 hours. The problem is that land which is growing rice, is it has autonomy and, you know, self-governance. And we can't go over there and say, right, we're organising shit. You guys, you might not want to grow rice, and you might, you know...
Wait. Are you sure about that? Because we actually have this world government, and it's a problem of corporatocracy and international finance. And if you go like the Chinese have gone to Africa, and they're building huge farms in Africa, they do get to say. They can go to another country and say, look, we're working 20 hours a week. This is how we do it. By the way, you get profit sharing. You could do that because the real government is this internet. They made it easy to put your company in another country, and every company, remember, has a constitution. The only problem with the constitution is it's called a partner agreement, and it's a constitution of how the owners treat each other. Screw the workers. You could easily have the same agreement also say how you treat the workers, and you import your own laws. Companies get to put their own little legal structure almost in any country in the world now.
Yeah, you're dead right. But what happens is they go in and rape. They've got a superior.
They don't go in there to bring co-ops. I'm sorry, you're right. Obviously,
superior bargaining position. They go in with a superior bargaining position, and they look after themselves primarily. They go in there, barbarise the country, blah blah blah. So it's got all these drawbacks, and it's a question of whether you believe in state autonomy and self-governance. I wasn't saying it is impossible, because we're going over there and waging war on the basis of giving ourselves oil contracts.
Right. They're taking advantage of this.
Possibility. It's the ethic of it that I'm questioning.
Right. Well, no. So the real situation, you're right, and they are going over and taking the fact that you can bring a corporation and into the probably more liberal regulation environment and actually bring your own laws. They're using it to rape people or oppress them or something. Yeah. And I was just making a theoretical point that means also that theoretically, if we started cooperative companies, like you have a billion-dollar company like Mondragon, that is also an opening for that kind of company to come in and say, look, we're starting a clothes factory in Bangladesh, and guess what? It's going to be cooperative.
Yeah.
You could do it. Nobody wants to. Nobody wants to is the problem. And yet so many millions of people want to. How is it that nobody wants to? Well, because among the top 0.1% that has the option to open a factory in Bangladesh, zero of them want to. That's the problem.
No, the problem is education and philosophy at a young age. That you're trained not to actually think and ask these questions about
Yeah.
what is
Well,
value, what is happiness.
wait, you
what
mean in the working class? You're
is
blaming the working class's lack of knowledge about these issues, you mean, primarily?
no, middle class as well, not just working class. I mean, middle class, working class.
The middle class is the working class. I mean, doctors that make
You're
in the
right.
top 1%, if you have to work or else your mortgage is in jeopardy, even if your mortgage is $3,000 a month because you're a doctor, it's really, there's a level of trust fund and family funds that people that really can't lose it all because they'll just get reinvested, like, you know, Bush failed and just gets reinvested. Okay, do you want to keep going because it's 6 o'clock? And I'm willing to keep going, but I need a break. We take a 5-minute break.
Yeah, we'll come back and do some physics or something
Good.
else.
Let's do that. Yeah, let's come back for physics. Okay, take 5.
Yeah.
All right, take 5 plus or minus a minute. Okay, bye. Oh, where are the boys? How'd you get in here? Come on, Lily child. You didn't want to go. What's the point of the universe is for all the safety beings in the context together? Is Jack staying the night? What? When's Teba? Okay, I was on the thing.
Star Wars. Intergalactic battles.
That is pretty awesome. I saw the video. I think you might have been. Oh, you can't even hear me. Oh, maybe you can. So yeah. So I saw your video of you running around your house. I think maybe you were drunk, and you're playing with all your toys. It was a great video.
I don't think it was.
I think it was great. I loved you were just kind of free flowing. It wasn't planned. You're like, oh, and here, look at this, and this relates to this one, and this one relates to this one. And here we go. You get the big all the strings coming down from the ceiling, and you spin it around and shoot a laser on it. I mean, that was fantastic. It was really great.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. And, I was showing Pyro earlier the my lasers. I have to switch the light off. That's what the
Yeah,
problem.
you got to turn the light off. It's really stunning. Do that. It's worth it. Redo that demonstration. That's cool.
I was just flashing the
As a matter of fact, do the whole thing and discuss the whole the lattice work there. Are you going to draw vertical lines? Are you going to draw longitudinal lines on there?
I've undecided. Just really triangle at the minute because I've got various geometric. You saw the buckets and stuff where I was making like a gravity well and such like. Because I was doing the Susskind videos, on general relativity, you know, where you have to get into tensors and stuff. And he said something which was I thought I'd share with you because it seems quite easy to understand Pythagoras' theorem. There's basically to move out of Euclidean flat plane geometry to do there's like a modification, like some what's the word? Like basically Pythagoras' theorem with some adjustments, yeah. So for other geometries, you just have Pythagoras' theorem with the adjustments.
Right.
But there was something in the lectures which, and there's a mathematics behind it which I've not got into yet. But he said that can you see the gyroscope? Yeah. And he said how we can detect curvature in space-time is the idea we have to get the mathematics of what you call parallel transporting. And parallel transporting is the idea of you can have a gyroscope and in flat geometry you can move it about and it comes back at the same angle. But in, I don't know whether I'll get this working, but in curved geometry, oh, it's broken, it's a cheap shit thing, but in curved geometry, it will come back and it will be at a different angle. And the measure of the difference between those angles is a measure of the curvature it's undergone. And it's just like where I like to get to, you know. But,
so that the sum of the angles is not constant, but it is within a boundary, plus or minus of 180 degrees, and that boundary will tell you the curvature of the surface you're on, yeah?
Sounds something like. I'm not sure whether that's exactly what I was saying. I think there will be for any particular curved geometry, there'll be a Pythagorean, not a Pythagorean. There'll be a triangle rule. You know,
right.
that's the angles add up to. I guess. But
you mean to the same thing? You mean the angles you think on that sphere, the triangles always add up to something? It's not 180, but it's been.
I'm guessing.
Oh, really? Because I'm guessing that it's from plus or minus less than 180 to more than 180, depending on where you take your planar slices. Because you're taking a planar slice of the sphere to get the line, so you get a curved line. And I don't think it'll always be the same. But anyway, yeah, interesting. Yeah. It's one reason it's interesting, because the other thing, like we were saying when I talked to you earlier, that I want to repeat about this is that because as esoteric as it seems, in reality, Cartesian space is esoteric. We live on a sphere. When we cut out a square, 100-acre piece of land, it's actually not a square in Cartesian space, it's a square in this spherical space, and so it's very, very practical, really. We just get to ignore it, but because our sphere is so big. And I'm doing all this mapping stuff right now, where the satellite that I'm working with takes a pretty big part of the Earth. Depending on how you project it, you see the fact that it's on a sphere, absolutely. In the projection. And so, if you start having squares that are even just a couple 100 miles long, a normal computer is going to notice, that the non-linearity of latitude and longitude, for example. So, as a matter of fact, in what I'm working with now, maybe hopefully this isn't too technical or anything, but a little divergence. What I'm working with now, I just had a bug where the system that I'm refactoring, I calculated the longitude and latitude for every pixel. in a particular image. Well, and I did it the correct way. So in a row of pixels, they're not all at the same latitude. It slightly changes because that's curved, and it screwed up a query because the previous calculation had been done a little more crudely, such that a row of pixels all had the same latitude, because they only differ out to like 4th and 5th decimal places in meters. In meters, they're only, we're talking about centimeters or something that it differs.
Quite a bit of a coincidence that I should be thinking of these concepts and you're programming it. Really.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things I really love about what I'm doing. I always wanted to work with this georeferencing, but one of the neat things is the mathematics of georeferencing. I was trying to describe this to Gary when I was in his room, and he asked me, hey, well, how's that going, what you're working on? And I told him, and then he gave me this whole thing about, well, that was boring. I wish I hadn't asked. But all this georeferencing stuff is cool because, okay, first of all, obviously the way you want to really do latitude and longitude with modern scientific precision, so to speak, is the Earth is not even a sphere, it's an ellipsoid. But on top of that, they find out, well, the Earth isn't really a very good ellipsoid either, not to the precision we want. So in Europe, you use a different ellipsoid than you use in North America or Asia. So there's multiple ellipsoids. Right, and then inside the ellipsoid, there's these UTM things where you try to flatten it out. The traditional try to make a flat map that really is flat, so you can measure distances and things coherently. Right, you don't want that angle of the gyroscope to change. So maybe if you look at a small, okay, and so anyway, in my current contract, I've mastered all this stuff.
A side note for you, because I know you're interested, and you was asking about Lie groups and Lie theory, wasn't you? And what I knew about that. Yeah. One of the aspects, I think, of Lie group theory is that it has the property topologically that it be able to be viewed as locally flat. I think.
Oh, interesting. And what's that called again? What kind of group?
A Lie group. Lie symmetries, Lie algebras, and such. Yeah, that's pretty wicked. So next scientific topic. The irony is kind of, I want to study general relativity as a challenge. I believe it like quantum mechanics has an error in it ultimately, but it's like reckoned to be one of the mathematical more challenging for the graduate student. There's a physics channel that I like running from Nottingham University, and he said, all the graduate physicists will understand special relativity, but only an elite few will sort of get general relativity really. They'll pass the exam and jump the hoop.
Are you familiar with Thomas Kuhn, the philosopher of science, Thomas Kuhn?
No.
He wrote a great book about the Copernican revolution, which is really, really fascinating, including, focusing on what Copernicus himself did not get, how traditionalist he still was, sort of that issue I was saying of us, maybe being akin to the future in some respects, but in the end, will be stuck in our own time, and that applied to Copernicus. I mean, Copernicus came up with this theory but wasn't really a part of the revolution. He still worked a lot with these mathematical assumptions of we need pure spheres. He just did it without epicycles and stuff. But anyway, Kuhn's theory is that, science is all about going towards paradigm shifts, that you can assume that quantum mechanics and general relativity have an error. But the thing is, they are correct to some degree of approximation, right? So that error will just simply clarify more about that. Yes, and most scientists, I would say, going from my physics, collegiate physics classes and stuff at Berkeley, I mean, the scientists at Berkeley at least, they're telling you right up front, we know there's something fishy about this. Why? Well, because we believe in general relativity and we believe in quantum mechanics, and those things prove almost impossible to rectify, and then we get some guy like Hawking's to force them together. Well, okay, he forced them together. Great. A genius can force them together. They don't fit together. doesn't make them fit together. And so we know there's a problem. And the Thomas Kuhn idea is that, well, right, you know, when we had Newtonian mechanics, sure, we just had one system, but we were in the same situation, that in reality, you know, whatever your system you have is just waiting for a paradigm shift. And at that point, everything you've been refining and filling in the blanks, there's a point at where the blanks move position, and you realize, wait, this is all a new paradigm, and you get to do it all again. You start then kind of almost from scratch, and you refill everything. So we know, and that's why the whole, you know, Einstein spent, what, the last 3 decades sort of fruitlessly trying for this theory of everything. The theory of everything, silly name maybe, but it's basically just not really about everything. It's more about, we know we have these two errors. We know we have these two systems, and that there's an error because they don't rectify well. So there's got to be a third system that rectifies them. It's either going to look like both systems, or it's going to look like neither. But we know that. You can deduce that. Can't you? Or induce it. You can induce there's a third system that brings this stuff together, and obviously nobody knows it. Yeah. So we know the unknown. We know what the unknown is.
I've said for a fact we know at least one of them's wrong, because they both make different predictions. That's the problem of unification, is that at the tiniest level, they make opposite, or not opposite, but different predictions at the tiniest.
Okay, yeah and no, yes and no, because Feynman and Hawking and the whole quantum electrodynamics and Hawking's claim to fame is having unified them, because basically there is a way to apply both of them at once and get a unified answer. It's just really mathematically super computationally intensive. Right, so it's like, and it's one of these things where you can get it perfect if you have an infinite number of terms. So with a real computer, you know, you can only do so well. They have been forced together. Well, Hawking has forced them together to that degree.
No,
I think so.
Hawking hasn't. I mean, there is quantum loop gravity and the string theory, which claim to some degree to have got them to work together.
Right, and mathematically.
When you watch the layman documentaries, they actually talk as though it's a done deal. They've done it. So there must be some qualification in that. But Hawkins himself is.
Oh, hey, you know, I want to talk about this.
Hawkins isn't. Hawkins only credited for black hole theory work, really.
Well, okay, yeah. I mean that's an interesting topic, and I see what you're saying. Yeah, and it'll be fun to talk about. But you reminded me of something else. So you showed this Feynman video where he points out that the way he calculates how much light is going to arrive at the detector is actually not just light that is bounced at an even angle or any of that, but it's light that's gone in any path. Right now, I had sent a comment to you. I don't know if you saw it about there's people that did a 3-slit experiment, where you actually have to add up the contribution of photons that have gone through one slit, back through another slit, and then back through the third slit in a totally random way. Like, just when a photon hits something, it bounces off at a random angle. And then in that video you show, though, he points out that the reason you would see the angle of incidence that we see in light is because of the way all of the weird random angles cancel each other out. Right? Because of the mathematics, it is possible for all this weird infinite number of paths to cancel out, but you'll find weird little paths that don't cancel out, proving the principle of, guess what, light can take any path. Now, the weird thing to me about that is that the paths take different amount of time. And when he does his little phase thing with the clock, you know, the vector that's rotating, that's basically just a phase mathematics mechanism, right? He's saying it doesn't matter how many times it bounces around the universe. It could take 1,000,000 years, and all you care is what angle is that phase, you know, thing when it finally hits the spot. But in our universe, it takes the speed of light times the distance or whatever to get to the location. And yet he's saying that, yeah, but light bounces all around the universe, and that determines whether it'll make it to that location. And what's weird about that actually makes some sense is, okay, in relativity, we have this idea that if you're going light speed, time stops. So maybe this is a clue as to what it means for time to stop. maybe the photon, time stops and it has time to bounce all the way around the universe, in and out through the tiny cracks in your device, whatever is available, back to the detector, because for it time has stopped. It can go a million years and come back in what for us is a billionth of a second and hit that detector. And maybe it's a clue as to what that could mean.
Entertain that as a philosophically plausible depiction of reality. Yeah,
well, it looks like it. I don't see how it could be.
Exactly. The thing is what he talks about is a particular mathematical idea which works out. Yeah, and there's no the mechanism. There's all these different ways of writing the mathematics and interpreting the mathematics, because the mathematics itself is devoid of mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah. But look, in the physical detector, you see the effects of it bouncing around in all these random paths, right? You can set up weird situations with certain blockages and stuff that cause really strange stuff to happen. That proves that Feynman's technique of pretending mathematically that the light took every possible path, and that the probability, it took it as a probability, and then the probability added up to this real path. You can prove that that's true, that it really does something like that.
I don't know what you're particularly alluding to.
Well, the video you showed, though, doesn't he talk about that? He talks about the light bouncing a million times off of various reflectors, and any path that ends up at the detector, you have to take into account all of them.
What he says is, with the path integral approach, that all paths are done every
contributing.
Path.
Yeah,
contributing,
right. So how can it contribute if it's not real in some way?
Right. But it's calculus, yeah.
But
right. No, but
it's there. It's
the
contributed.
mechanism, the mathematical formulation of summing these paths is not the same as saying it actually takes the path.
Oh, it's over there.
You get the same answer from not doing the Feynman integral. Okay. And yeah.
No, how? In normal cases, you do, right? You get this angle of incidence equals angle of reflection, but you can set up weird situations where that fails.
Well, you'll have to reference me these weird situations where.
Okay.
Hang on. The path integral approach. This is my understanding of the fact of the matter that there be interpretations of quantum mechanics, right? And the path integral approach is one interpretation, and my understanding is that pretty much all the other major interpretations can have stand by physical evidence equally. That's what it means to choose your philosophical agreeable interpretation. Why does Great?
But for example, with the three-slit experiment, with this three-slit experiment, there's a contribution mathematically that explained possibly by the probability mode of the photon, not the photon itself, but this probability wave going forward and backward, such that the photon would have traced forward and backward, kind of bouncing randomly. And that contribution shows up in the resultant image. Thus, any of the other compatible theories still have to deal with the fact that there is a physical evidence of the photon traveling back and forth, what we would consider as a real photon, because it has that mathematical contribution. Now, you could say, well, that mathematics isn't the ontology of the situation, but it's still added up. It's still done the accounting, and there is a contribution. And any physical explanation of that contribution has to do with something physically traveling through the route it takes to make that contribution, right? So it seems to me that even though you don't really know which part is the mathematical hypothesis and which is the ontological real stuff in the universe, you do know that there's truth to this many histories approach. You know, with the Feynman diagrams, you see a Feynman diagram, that's just one. There's always, for any interaction, an infinite number of Feynman diagrams, and you want to add up as many orders of those as you can, and if you do, you get the more and more accurate answer, and that proves, in some sense, that there is an ontological reality to the many histories. It doesn't mean those things happened, but it means something equivalent to them happening happened, right? So
Agreed.
we do know, yeah.
Agreed.
So,
yeah, as long as you've said everything there that we both understand each other and find that agreeable, yeah. Yeah, it's same with gravity. When we find a new theory of gravity, it will have to account for everything that general relativity accounted for, and whatever the mechanism is of, for whatever reason this math works out, yeah, it will be mathematically one and the same. I don't know. It's,
right, and so I mean, when you see the other systems, I just wonder, because like in the Copenhagen, to use the gross example, the Copenhagen non-multi, that it collapses, yeah, it adds up to the same thing. So you call it collapsing, but you still have to talk about these potential states where it hasn't collapsed. So it ends up being much the same thing, you know. But I have another thing I was interested in running by you, because I've been doing a couple things. One, I have this book that I spent a couple weeks writing, and I'm still working on, called Illusions Exist, and I'm working on this phantasmagorical theory, and they're kind of related, one going into the other. So with the phantasmagorical thing...
This is your second book then, yeah?
No, it's the first one.
A month or two out to write one book, didn't you?
No, I've been writing my whole life, so many things are going into books.
3 or 4 months ago, you said, I'm going quiet for a month or two, I'm going to devote... And
it's the same book. It's the same book. I'm editing it now. I finished it, but I really want to go through and edit it. So, but anyway, so it's not about this phantasmagorical theory. It's more about setting down the stuff that I've talked about so far, and it leads to this. So, this has to do with consciousness and stuff, and so leave that aside because it's just sort of there. But the way I'll put it is, okay, so what I'm getting from the current quantum mechanics, again, we don't know the whole story, but what's the minimum that we can deduce, and, you know, maybe eliminate some possibilities or something, know the sphere of possibility. To me, it looks like what we have is this ancient question, a question I asked when I was a kid, about what is information. You know, the photon's out there, and when it hits our eye, we see, oh, it was red. So that's information when it's red, but is there really information in the photon? And I think the quantum mechanics is showing us over and over by various demonstrations that yes, there's information in the universe. When we talk about having to observe a phenomena, it's not really obviously a human eye. According to the quantum mechanics, it doesn't matter that it's a human eye that observes it. It could be a piece of photographic paper, or it could be a rock that gets a dent in it. All of those count as observations and would collapse the wave function, right? But right, sort of entanglements, yeah. And so once you're committed to a certain event having happened, that is information in the real world, right? And it means that information does happen in the real world. And the quantum erasure and stuff shows that, look, you can't make a dent in a rock and erase that, but you can have information that you set up a system where you know you have information at one state, but at the next step you've erased having that information and it counts as never having the information. To me, that shows that the universe really is, that rather than thinking of the universe as a bunch of stuff that we invent information about, it really is information. This is great news because we are information processors, and it means that we're actually experiencing reality a little more directly than people like me, a skeptic, you know, are inclined to admit off the bat. We are actually we are really partaking in an information world where the world really is made of information. We're not just transmitting it into information.
I'm going that way now, where I think that ultimately we'll understand that we can never get beyond the idea of the most truth we'll ever be able to say is that the universe is information.
Right.
I'm coming to that, and I've long-standing been going to that mode of thinking. Yeah. I'd like to study quantum information and this, that, and the other, because yeah, it seems more and more evident to me that we're grasping at straws or thinner or whatever in trying to find mechanism. I think we'll have to give up philosophically at some point about the idea of trying to find mechanism and realize philosophically it is an intractable problem.
Well, but wait, no, but I'm saying we can find information processing mechanisms. So, for example, I don't know if you got this angle.
But the implementation,
for example,
I can implement the same information processing an infinite number of ways. I
think
agree.
Inventive is trying to get in there.
And we'll get our physics rules out of hypothesizing different information processing. But when you come up, say you came up with the next theory of general relativity based on modeling information updates, you'll find then there'll be a generation that follows you will all find alternate ways of doing the same information processing.
Yeah. That's the Kuhn thing. That's the Kuhn thing. Anyway, hey, Inventive, I see you had your hand up, I think.
Yeah, I think I want to talk a bit about Kuhn. Like it's what Hythloday is saying is that the problem's intractable. At some point, we won't be able to determine between theories at all with any kind of experimentation. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. There's some interesting stuff that went on with the Higgs boson thing, where there's one theory was predicting a gram per electron volt measurement of this, and another theory was predicting that we'd find a Higgs boson, but it would have a gram per electron volt of this.
Right.
And we find it, and it's got one that's in the middle. And so Thomas Kuhn would say something that they're about to get violent on each other. But I think I want to talk about like we kind of have to think about what does information mean. Like certainly a tennis ball or a basketball has information, right? So it's got weight and mass and color and whatever you want information's got on it.
Yeah.
But where it gets interesting is when the information disappears, right? So that's where it kind of becomes mathematical. And I was watching the Susskind videos, and it kind of seems that whole information can never be destroyed. It can always go back to a previous system. We can always go back to see as the ABC kind of thing, or heads and tails things he does with this.
You know what? Hey, what about this? Just to interject, but I want to go right back to you. So tennis ball has information. I think one way of putting the interesting part of this question is, okay, the tennis ball has information. You talked about the mass and stuff. Let's say we grant velocity. Does the tennis ball have information about whether it's on Serena or Venus Williams' half of the court, what part of the court it's in? Does it have information maybe about the score at all if it was used in previous point? You know what I mean? How much, where's the limit of that information? Is it just its mass, it's in itself, philosophically thing in itself, or is it really information about all of its relationship, who hit it last, how many times?
I'm not a physicist, but it seems like that's what Suskind's saying, is that it somehow would remember which if it was heads or tails previously.
One of the central propositions one of the central propositions that we ought to consider and invite comment on is that Susskind says information cannot be destroyed. That's one of the central ideas.
Yeah, well, I got in trouble with his thing. Did you guys catch his thing where he's saying the heat that comes out of your computer is the information being thrown away?
Yeah.
I use that one because, like on my Phantasmagorical, I'm looking for stuff like that. Okay, Stanford physicist says something, I can quote verbatim, and Minham thinks I'm a Phantasmagorical. That's a win. No, but I love that idea, and I think I see how it's literally true. It's because you are erasing. If you follow why it's hot, it is because you've got all this energy and you're kind of throwing it away so you can refresh it, because that's your only way to keep it actually steady and not, randomly changing. So, but anyway, yeah.
When you mentioned the Higgs boson, it was an excuse when he was talking about the Mexican hat function. I thought he really should have invested in a Mexican hat when he was explaining the Higgs boson. So I thought, if I ever get to do that, I will have a Mexican hat to explain the Higgs boson. Well,
Good. That's when you got your hat. You're good with props. I notice you have a skill with props. You're up there. It's like right up there with Carrot Top.
You're like Carrot Top.
Yeah.
Hello.
Exactly. You get the. But
So
Can
it
you
seems
guys
like.
hear me, by the way? Hello.
hello, Great Tech.
Hello.
yeah.
How you doing?
Not bad. You got comments on the physics?
No, they're all models and they bore me.
So what have you come along for?
Yeah, we should take a Greatex tangent. I actually sent an invite through Google Plus to Greatex because it gave me the option, but I didn't think you'd show up. And this is the actual Greatex. I didn't know that. I just now noticed it was Greatex there under that yes icon. How ironic. You have a yes?
Yes, Scotland vote, isn't it?
I can't be bothered changing my avatar. It's been like that for about 6 months. I can't be bothered changing it.
So what's up, Greatex? Yeah, you know, you're one of my first, like, a red light rocket. You're one of my first people that made me go, wow, there's people saying cool philosophical stuff. And that was back, of course, when your face was still a video game.
It still is a video game, and I don't know why it's cool, because I know nothing about philosophy or physics or anything like that.
Well, remember, I was trying to get you to help make those videos for my political blog I was working with at the time, because you were talking a lot of political stuff, and I was like, this guy actually has this political insight, meaning he agrees with me.
I'm gonna interject here, Pyro. I'm left. I felt like you was building up to something, like you wanted to ask, or a particular concept you wanted in this book. So we didn't finish somehow. I feel like we sort of ran off, and
You two are never bloody finished.
That's right, true. I'm certainly, hopefully, I probably will die.
I'm left with a niche though that needs scratching. It's like, what was you do? What was you saying? I need.
Are you talking about me, or you mean Greatex had something?
You
Oh
said.
no, I raised it. I was saying, I mean, I'm getting on this thing that, you know, the information. It's sort of a spiritual angle of, if the universe really is information, and we are these information processors, it's almost like rediscovering that we're in the right universe. Because don't we all kind of feel like, what the fuck am I doing in this universe? This is not what I wanted or signed up to. It's not the problems I was willing to put up with. This is bullshit. And if we're all information processors, like just instinctively, and the universe really is information, then oh, we're actually doing something here, and we could go ahead and fix things again, or work on things, make things better, and we have the knowledge to know it's fucked up, so that means we have the knowledge to know it's better. And so to me, that's this phantasmagoricalism, is just going by, you know, and using phantasm as, okay, you got a perception, but a phantasm's like a perception, and you don't know what it meant. It's like, oh, I had a feeling. Oh, it was weird. I don't know what that was all about. And that's really the only level that we're all sensing. We don't really know what it means.
You know, I'd be inclined to disagree. I mean, it seemed a bit metaphoric that we are information processors, and I'd be inclined to be wary of how far you could push that concept and what the implications are of it. But yeah, I hear you. But so are you?
Yeah, no, great for you, but I'm saying I'm at the point where I want to push that, and I think that it'll technically work out, is my prediction or hope or whatever.
What do you think?
I guess I would have a question about the information processors. Like, I've heard it said, if it all boils down to just some kind of information, like bits, some kind of bits of information, that the university is essentially mathematical, right? And so then to be a pain in the butt, what I ask people is like, well, if it all comes down to math, like, there's a whole bunch of different mathematical systems, right? So like in Boolean algebra, 1 + 1 is 1, and
yeah,
there's all these kinds of ways of doing math. So if it all boils down to maths, which math is it?
Right. Can I answer that first? I have opinions on that. Okay, so which math is it? Okay, first of all, I don't think it's any of the maths, because I think the reason it goes down to math is just phenomenological. Mathematics is the human brain's language of patterns. and the universe has patterns in it, so we can use language of patterns to describe things. And you can see this in math. So for example, you have an arbitrary curve, including of random points. You can model that with a Taylor series, a polynomial, a fast Fourier transform based function. You know, you can model it all different kinds of ways. So the reason it looks like the universe is mathematical is really more broadly because the universe follows patterns. Math is our attempt to name the patterns. Now, having said that, I expected Boolean mathematics to be entirely non-fundamental. Like, I used to like ideas of, let's make computers with 3 bits. You know, I mean, with 3 values in the bit. However, the quantum mechanics people have reestablished this, the bit is the fundamental unit, through various things that are pretty compelling, like just simply, you know, well, the spin's up or down. There's a lot of these in or out kind of 0, 1 is enough. That, I mean, Seth Lloyd from MIT, you know, he talks about flipping the coin, and the amount of entropy in the coin flip is 1 bit's worth because it comes up heads or tails. And he's fudging it a little because what if it comes up on its side and all that stuff. But really, I mean, they make a good argument that while I think that the mathematics is arbitrary because it's just a language like French or English, which do you want to talk about the rows in? There might be something actually fundamental about the binary mathematics, and binary, and that's what Wolfram says, is it's all binary and it's cellular automata based, which brings you down to a 0 and 1, and if you do a gradient, it's really because you've got a bunch of 0s and 1s and that kind of thing.
Well, I'd definitely like to answer. I think what I'm going to say is essentially what you've said, only I'll say it much better and much more succinctly. No, I think it's tautological in a sense. I think the key recognition is, as you've done, is to recognise math as a language. You can say, I like it sometimes, but I don't think it's the whole story when you say math is recognising patterns, and I forgot the reason I have that objection. But I do have a really good objection to that. Maybe it'll come to me in a minute, but it's largely true, and it's often said, and so it's. But if whatever way if we're assuming things like information is conserved and that there is regularity in the rules of the universe, then that's the principal aims of mathematics is based upon that there be that regularities and not self-contradictions. So any language which describes that, or information imparted about that, will by definition, even if it's nothing that we have at the minute, will get instantly labelled as math, because it's a system of describing non-contradictory schemas, yeah? So you can't get away from the fact that mathematics will describe the universe. Unless it turns out that the shit's random and gravity tomorrow will reverse, and you know I'll wake up in Australia, and you know, and the sun will switch off. And
but wait, are you kind of arguing? Could I rephrase? Would it be fair that you're arguing that maybe it's not patterns isn't even general enough? That really mathematics is the language of consistency.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, because it's like even a stochastic function, by looking at that as a mathematical thing, you're saying it has this consistency of being totally unpredictable. You know what I mean? It's sort of a mathematical trick that no matter what it is, it's like, well, what if I looked at this as a consistent thing? It's going up and down. Oh, look, it's a sine wave now. It's consistent again. Yeah.
Well, Marcus Sortu, or whatever his name is, the Sortu, he says, I'm a pattern finder and mathematicians are pattern finders. And you understand that from the concepts of group theory, and he's a group theorist. But there's so many other mathematical realms which really say, no, that's not the be-all and end-all of mathematics. You know, it may not be that it is succinctly put as you put, just, you know.
Well, it's an interesting point because, like, if you think of like an elementary mathematical thing, though, that starts to get into what mathematics is about, like solving for n variables with n equations, what are you really doing? You're saying, okay, assume all these different equations actually. Are you okay?
You remember the other week I had a pain in the chest?
Uh-uh.
I just got a pain there.
Uh-uh. But anyway, you're saying with that these 6 equations or 3 equations, they all have to be consistent. What can I deduce if I take these 3 equations and assume they're all consistent? And so it is kind of I mean, consistency is probably the most fundamental thing, but then again, you could just say, what is a pattern? Well, a pattern is finding a consistency in possibly diverse data. So you got this heterogeneous spectrum of data, and you find out it's not random. Here is the pattern, which is really just saying, here's the consistency. Here's the way I made it all a function of X or whatever.
When we did the Gödel discussions, I recall in the very early sentences about the incompleteness and stuff, it talked about maths striving for consistency and completeness, right? And the Gödel theorem was saying, pick one. Yeah. You cannot, right? And I think it's a fair comment to say, if you had to pick one, you'd go, well, it better be fucking consistent. All right, there's a world I can't reach. I can't get complete answers and be sure about certain things. But God, if I have to pick one, it's consistency.
I think so. That's right.
An emotional desire, though. It's an emotional desire to have some kind of consistency in it, in order to make us feel a particular way.
Yeah.
No.
Well, if we wanted consistency, we would stop, right?
But then what about
like we've got the Newtonian physics, right? And with Newtonian physics, it's consistent within itself, right? But we want to know a little bit more, and we want to know a little bit more, and the more we try and learn, then we're going to go find inconsistencies.
Yeah. Well, but the gray text. Right, so exactly, being consistent is sort of, that's what Hythloday is saying, it's giving up on being complete, so you know that I've got a really nice consistent system, but it's so closed, there is going to be a space outside it. But gray text, you're making almost a political or social sounding comment. I want to ask if you are, that, okay, this desire for this consistency is emotional and maybe arbitrary. Well, I agree with that prima facie, but look how consistent things have turned out. I mean, it's kind of funny then that if that's an arbitrary emotional desire, that it's being satisfied, that it can be satisfied so completely, and maybe there's something to it. Maybe we desire that because the universe really is consistent. We can expect corporations to treat us consistently instead of, with 2 faces. I mean, maybe there's something real to that. That's the part of this phantasmagorical where the information and the math and the patterns all comes back to, that's how our brains work. Maybe we can expect the universe to be fucking rational. Maybe it really is supposed to make sense.
I just think it's how our brains work. We always look for these patterns. We always look for these things. A few weeks ago, I tried alpha-methyltryptamine for the first time, and I realized when I was hallucinating that all these little patterns of my veins of my eyes were turning into letters and runes and everything else. This is the core origin of language and the core origin of written language and everything else. It's like our brains try to make order out of this chaos, and we feel comforted by that order. We feel comforted by order out of chaos, and we feel comforted by making patterns out of everything that exists. And that comfort that we feel, is just that. It's just comfort.
Yeah. But for example, let me take I'm trying to let your side of the argument have the most weight. Let's say I see a face in a cloud. So we could all pretty much agree that this is an illusion. It's not really but it really is a pattern in the cloud, right? I mean, I recognize that there is some truth to me seeing that pattern, and if I have a desire to put a pattern into nature, that doesn't necessarily delegitimize that pattern was in nature. Just because somebody else could see a different face or a different creature or no face at all, okay, so there's infinite patterns in one phenomena of nature. So doesn't mean there wasn't one pattern, it means there was infinite. You know what I mean? I didn't lose the truth of the face I saw. Everybody else just also has a truth, and to me that feels like less
cynical about the arbitrariness of it all. Well, can I just interject? I mean, to me, it seems the question would be resolved by asking about the logical absolutes. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just muted mine from some noise here.
Right, okay. Yes. So to me, you know, is something arbitrary that something, you know, can have a property and also not have a property? Is that an emotional desire to see that truth, that it's not allowed? I don't think so, you know, because, you know, that's where this as Greatex would put it, emotional yearning for consistency. It's weird seeing Pyro just pottering about.
I want drinks passed me.
Sorry, I'm trying to multitask, but yes, I'm also interacting with my family here. So
yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
What did you say, Greatex? Everybody, what passed you?
I want drinks passed to me as well. I need servants.
Right. Oh yeah, he's got a lovely wife there, passing constantly, remaining hidden in the background, keeping him going, sustained.
I know I'm feeling really lucky, but I've been through hell and fire, so I deserve it.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. As no, I think mathematics has to have consistency, because that's kind of the game. You can't wish for something. Oh, I use the example that was given to me. You can't wish for something that defeats the purpose of what you're wishing for. Like, you can't wish to be educated badly. You know, because it defeats the idea of the purpose. Yeah?
Right, or like wishing to be rich and famous and well loved.
So that's why you mathematically choose consistency, because I could invest, you know, 10 years like what's his name did, proving Fermat's theorem, only for somebody else to prove it false. I supposedly prove it true, and somebody else invests 10 years and says, yes, I've done it too, but I proved it false.
Wait, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about the defeating of the purpose.
No, I mean this detail you're using as an example. I know about Fermat's theorem being proved right. Are you saying it has been proved wrong as well?
No.
Okay, good, yeah. Well, you were being unholy.
Yeah,
okay.
No, I was explaining why we choose consistency as the priority above completeness, and it's because I couldn't live with the idea, and it's based on the logical absolutes that, you know, the endeavor is, well, I don't know.
Well, are you saying that completeness is good because really in this concept of completeness, as abstract and complex as it seems, we really can be sure of our proofs. Now, there's limits still that come into the proofs, but it's funny because like Gödel's theorem about incompleteness is itself complete. It takes everything into account and proves that with the rules of first-order logic or arithmetic, you're not going to be able to prove that arithmetic is the absolute way to reason.
Can't be complete.
So his argument takes everything into account, and so by looking at things from this completeness point of view, it is kind of amazing how you can make these final statements and realize that, well, guess what? You know, you're never going to prove that mathematics is true based on the axioms of mathematics. Sorry, self-proving won't work. We know that. And it's kind of weird that we can know that kind of thing. And it does come from this concept.
Yeah. You had it. No. You didn't come through then. Pyro. Can't hear Pyro, me. Who can hear Pyro?
Bizarre lag.
Is it lag? I can hear you, Greatex.
Can you hear me?
I hear you, Inventive.
Okay.
The transatlantic link is broken.
No. Yeah, Pyro's got some audio problems.
So
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm glad you turned up for the economics bit, Inventive. I was
Oh, you guys always have interesting stuff to talk about. You know, I think, you know, like with this mathematical consistency stuff, I always bring up this Hermé Lakatos guy that no one's heard of. But he had this really cool book called Proofs and Refutations. And I think the problem is more complex than Gödel or the axiom problem. Is that, okay, so his idea is really heavy, so he's got this philosophy part in the back. But in the front of the book, in order for people to get it, he's got kind of a play. It's written like there's a professor and there's a bunch of students, and there's like student alpha and student beta and student gamma, and they've all been named after Greek letters. And they're talking about this theorem. I don't know who proved it, but it's basically say if you have some kind of shape that's regular, that if you subtract the number of vertices from the number of faces, you get 2. And
Yeah.
this is, yeah, right? So,
Euler's relation, not
okay.
relation. It's an Euler formula. You get it.
Yeah. So one of the students says, well, you know, what about a star kind of shape? And another student says, well, you know, it has to be convex, right? If it's not convex, then the theorem doesn't work. You know, so you have to put an exception in the theorem that it has to be convex. Everybody knows that. And the other student's like, well, you didn't say it had to be convex, you know?
Yeah.
They're like, well, it does, okay? So we're going to add that to our theorem. It has to be convex. And this guy just keeps coming up with more and more shapes. I'd love to get that book and kind of do a video of like all these crazy, like multi-dimensional shapes he comes up with to keep breaking the theorem.
I'd like to do a reading of it.
I love it. I just think this is great. So they keep making more and more exceptions and rules to save their theorem from his refutations. And as they're going on in a kind of Thomas Kuhn style, they're getting more and more nasty with each other, right? They're calling his shapes monsters. Like, I think your shapes are monsters, and why are you trying to disprove a really good theorem, right? It's a useful theorem. What's your problem? And he's like, well, why don't you just define a polygon as that which you can subtract the vertices from the edges and get 2. So
can I just say that actually there's that Euler equation for networks and Pyro might well be aware of it, but for graph theory, there's a generalization of it which is true for all topological surfaces that take into account the convexity. You know, that's true for the basic geometries that we understand polygons exist in, but there is a more general theory. I forgot how that is. And
sure. And you can always patch these things up. There's, you know,
I just don't want.
It kind of comes after Popper, right?
Mathematics and getting the last word in.
Right. Exactly. So he comes after Popper. Popper says that, you know, if you've got some theory that's falsifiable and then it's falsified, you have to like just let it go, right? Like completely. Where part of what Lakatos is saying is that it's a web of beliefs, and you'll come across a contradiction, and that'll destroy part of the web. But you don't have to get rid of your whole idea of science just because there's a problem between quantum physics and space physics, right?
Yeah. I was wondering whether you might like to do a video. I'd like to see you talk about communism and socialism and contrasting with capitalism and what your views are on that, because me and Pyro have locked arms on market principles, and he has ideas of
a commissary. Yeah, I watched a number of those videos. I didn't watch them all the way through.
No. He called it something, a commissary.
Yeah.
Commissary.
It was for the old people. It was for people on fixed incomes. We give them a fixed income, but prices keep rising, right? So he wants to fix prices on some goods for them.
That's right, yeah. But no, it wasn't just. No, it was for everybody. He was saying he did relate it to old people and various applications, but the general principle, he was saying this could provide for a lot of people. I think it weren't just for old people.
I guess what I'd say, you know, is if people are incentivized to do a command economy, then they'll do a command economy, right? So I'll complain about how there wasn't enough toilet paper in Russia. But if you look at the command economy of the United States during World War II, and they're like, okay, we're going to just take a bunch of factories and change those factories and making bullets and tanks, and we're going to ration all the food people get and do all this kind of communism stuff. And it worked because people had all this huge patriotism. Let's go fight the Nazis. Let's go fight the Japanese. That it was one of the most efficient economies we've seen so far. It was completely command economy.
Well, what about China? I'm sorry I'm in the middle
sure.
of this, but China, geez, they're building these whole cities, and yet now it's slowed down. But I mean, even in its slowdown, it's like these guys can build a city the size of Cincinnati overnight and have been. It's pretty fucking amazing what you can do. People don't want to admit. I mean, it's like it's hard to do that in a capitalism.
What was the problem with the audio?
I don't know. It just stopped working. I had to go out several levels, and so.
On my agenda for this evening was fields. I wanted to take you to task about fields.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, because I'm an advocate. I'm a good advocate for fields because I'm on the fields are the real thing. Everything else is imaginary. You're like fields are the imaginary part.
Yeah, me and Emendum are in this same club for this. That you're a phantasmagoricalist field theorist. Yeah.
There's only the medium. There's nothing in it.
Yeah, I don't know.
And you're like, there's only things, nothing for them to be in.
I don't know.
We're both wrong. It's just like the other stuff we were talking about. But anyway, go ahead. But I think basically we know we're both wrong. It's got to be some weird, not even a hybrid, but some new concept. Yeah. Information solves it.
Yeah, I'm happy to just say, Luke, yeah, field is a useful fiction, yeah, but it's all information. And we can imagine a field is just a particular way of how you put it, as processing the information.
Yeah.
But the other ways, perhaps, because...
Wait. No, it's more fundamental than that, because the field, what it is it captures our spatial reasoning. The idea that stuff can, locality or non-locality, it's all about this idea of a field, which is just an idea of a space that has stuff in it. Yeah. And so, I mean, that gives it a more fundamental reality to me because, I would love to just go, time's an illusion, space is an illusion. Well, I mean, it's a pretty persistent illusion. The fact that we can spread things out over space seems pretty damn fundamental. I'm not really willing to get rid of it. Especially since we've discovered the world is information, and maybe something about how we think of information is more valid than we skeptics would want to assume. We're going back to basics. There is information, and how can it not be spread out? So something about there being information seems to imply that there's a field for it to exist in, for things to be distinct in. You need a field in order for two things that are different to exist, right? You need a space so you can separate them, and different things can exist if you separate them. So how can you get rid of this concept of space? And that's what I think you're tangling with when you're saying that it's just a fiction, the field. I think it's better to say it's a fiction, this idea of a particle.
Well, do you recall ever saying in a discussion, I raised the issue about a temperature field, yeah? Mm-hmm. And you said, yeah, a temperature field, it's a field. And I said, no. Well, I don't think we continued, but you made this point and said, no, for me, I'm happy. The temperature field is a field. And when we discuss fields and whether they're applicable or right or wrong and such forth, what I have in my mind is when I say they're not true or they don't exist, what I mean is they're not the fundamental construct, and so and they're not the best explanatory.
But the quantum field is, right? So okay, that's fine. Okay, but I'll grant you that. I'm just saying I'll grant you that right off. Obviously, there's no temperature field in that sense.
Right. Okay. So
it's
obviously,
a high abstraction.
The more fundamental understanding of temperature is all the balls vibrating. Yeah, is more fundamental than that's okay. So given
But they
that,
still need space to vibrate in, so they still need a field, and ultimately they still have this quantum. Yeah.
okay, all right, let that ride. A question: discrete or continuous? The nature of space.
Well, I don't know, but I'm leaning towards the fact that there's some discrete aspect to it, right? There's a Planck distance, for example. But the weird thing about the Planck distance is that it depends on your own frame of reference. So the Planck distance between two objects might be separated by the Planck distance for me, but you're going at the speed of light, so or near the speed of light, so supposedly that distance is smaller. From your frame of reference, it's still the Planck distance, but from my frame of reference, your Planck distance is a different length than my Planck distance. So suddenly you get this continuity out of that, right? Because these Planck distances, it's not like they lock into a pixel grid. You know, they can.
Well, that's the question. Yeah, I mean, so this is a question I'd like to pose to Emendum as well. You know, if you had to choose discrete or continuous, well, first of all, would you acknowledge that there's a problem kind of with both viewpoints? Yeah, so there is a problem, and I lean towards discrete, and I then ask the question, let's consider it discrete for the time being. And I've thought like you and thought, when we say that, are we saying it's pixelated, or are we saying that things can only move in a discrete fashion, discrete distance?
Right. It's more the latter.
Like you said, the overlap, the Planck, all the positions exist. Well, that's kind of a continuity in a way. That's exactly. That isn't true. That's actually a third type of discretism.
Right. So I believe in continuity really because of what you just said. Yeah, I believe there's a continuity in this sense because all of those values are possible. So yeah, exactly. It really turns out into continuity, even though I believe in a quantum discreteness. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're a continuous person.
I think so, probably.
Then you're faced with the task really of what not Emendum, Feynman talks about the problem of infinite process. Yeah, that we have to compute. It would take a computer, and we've acknowledged that we're processing an information. And he's saying, you know, the implications of calculus and Zeno's paradoxes and of continuity is the idea that, you know, it takes infinite processing to work with a continuity. So that's why I ditched that idea and I prefer discrete, because it fits with our agreed-on computational model, but it raises another problem insofar as what kind of discretist are you saying that? And again, this is where it falls into back into continuity. You know, you're saying, are you saying something? Can you see this all right? It's just when grey text is yes pops up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're getting me.
I can see it.
Are we saying that this exists and can only move unit steps? There's no in between steps, or are we saying that it actually disappears instantaneously and then reappears here? Because to not say that is again really to implement a kind of continuity. Yeah, because you could say, well, does it go high from here to here? Does it go from here to here? You know, does it?
Yeah.
How does it tipple over? Does it slide?
Well, I'm of the opinion that it looks like it basically quantum teleports this super micro distance, and is more like the frames of a movie than it is like our traditional idea of a thing moving. And I think that the E equals MC squared nature of everything in this quantum field is sort of like, yes, it looks more like a micro teleportation than it does a BB that can travel at all of those intervening points. Yeah, and so you get the benefit of both. You can have things at any position, but you don't have to work at that resolution in reality because things are going along according to their own frequencies.
Okay. So the problem is for fields now, that was the groundwork to raise the problem, a problem with fields, is that with at each of these points in space, these discrete points in space, we have a number. For example, the Higgs field was described as the 0 point. You know, it has a value throughout space, yeah, in this Mexican hat function. And what we're saying is literally it's a scalar field, so it doesn't point in any direction, but at every point in space there's a number. And I'm asking, well, the obvious question would be, how's it stored? Yeah? And not only that, so at each point we have this number, but there's a connectivity to the point at the side of it, because perturbations in the field drag up that surrounding spatial field value, yeah. So, you know, that's a problem for me. How is it implemented that there's a connectivity, and the nature of the field, the way a wave in the field transmits is governed by constants of that connectivity. Okay?
Right.
So you find yourself digging deeper and deeper to problems.
But this is the sense in which I would ultimately be more of a continualist, is because the way I see it is, okay, so the sort of the resolution of space is different for every particle in its own frame of reference, right? So the resolution of space, and so it's totally malleable. In other words, so the discreteness is relative to a particular particle, and thus you just add that mathematics at that level, and then when you're interacting with another particle, you have to use its coordinate space, so you just get this complex problem where you have to transform between coordinate spaces. And when you do that, yeah, it does matter if I'm in the, you know, the last third of the pixel or the beginning of the pixel, because when you do the transformation, those pixels are going to be redivided and kind of redistributed. And so I look at the world as continuous, because you can always, everything's sort of infinitely fungible. You can always split things up, you know, within limits, within the limit of this particle has a certain amount of energy, but still in another frame of reference, how much energy that photon has is different. Right, so that's what makes everything actually totally continuous again, is that you have to do both calculations, or if there's a million particles, you have to do a million calculations of this photon A has energy sub I, depending on your frame of reference, more or less, you know, it varies. And so it looks continuous in the end, because you have to use the continuous mathematics, right? You end up using continuous. You don't use a digital mathematics for it. Use a continuous mathematics with a sort of a discrete
that's
boundary.
All we have at the minute, yeah. That's all we have is but the continuous mathematics is an idealist model which works.
Yeah.
But when we think philosophically, we find these problems of infinities versus, you know, teleportation, as you put it, which is a good way of putting it, yeah. And what I say, it's difficult for us to talk about the problems in a way about fields. Maybe if we're vacillating between the discrete perspective and the continuous perspective. But if I move over and consider the continuous perspective for a moment, I could say to you again, if these are just numbers in a continuum, what gives the nature of the connectivity between points? Because one field will have a different set of constants that govern its propagation of a wave. And, you know, so like we can wiggle the Higgs field and say, hey, we have a Higgs boson. But then we can also, but the way the Higgs field wobbles is different to the way the electromagnetic field wobbles. So where's that information? Yeah, and let me go just one step further about the problem with fields, and that is, it's left me. Interject if you like, and I'll probably come back to it. But yeah, is this it just doesn't
Yeah,
hold
well,
water to me. The infinities, the problems it raises.
but that's another thing. You don't like infinities, right? But which is funny for a mathematician, because usually mathematicians just love those infinities. But anyway, but the thing with infinities is that really we have the wrong concept, right? Because there is this sort of limited infinity. The proper, what I would consider the proper concept of infinity includes an idea of a limit. You know, this whole, who was the guy that figured out the different sizes of infinity?
George Cantor.
Cantor, right? So, so it makes intuitive sense if you just realize that, yeah, there's an infinite number of points in a circle, but it's not all the points.
Well, I'm not, I don't like, I mean, I do like it from one point of view, but I'm not a fan of George Cantor's work, obviously, and the idea of larger infinities. I've made videos poking holes at it.
Well, but I see an idea of infinity where we have a universe that is 13 billion years or 14 billion, light years in size. You're 40 meters, or no, you're a couple thousand miles away from me, and so your center of the universe is shifted, and therefore the edges of your universe are shifted, but they're still finite. And if you wanted to get to the edge of your universe, it's infinite away, but that's because space is compressed. So to me, it's just like the infinite number of points on a line segment or something. It's like, okay, we've got an infinite universe, and yet it all fits in 14, or let's say 28, light years of space for each individual, and that's compatible. You have a finite amount of infinity.
Well, we're not going to get any agreements or understanding on that.
Well, okay, so let me jump in here.
Come in, Inventive.
Okay, so in econ, it certainly is a discrete amount of money in the world, right? So it can all be boiled down to pennies and pence, right? But when we're doing economics, we're not going to do it with discrete math because larger law of large numbers, that all the little pieces will act as a continuous function.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that helps the conversation or not.
Well, that's what we're arguing about. It's like we both admit it can act like the other. Which is it really?
Well, no,
right.
Exactly, yeah. The usefulness of calculus and assuming a continuum is without question. The usefulness of the mathematical model of fields is without question. The question is, as Pyro put it, but is it true?
Yeah, is it really that? Yeah. And see, to me, my intuition, granted, is an intuition, is that you have to have some mechanism for spreading things out. So you can have a concept of locality and non-locality. And fields is the most abstract thing we have at this point that spreads things out. Space is another word for it. There's other historical things. But you're not going to get away from having to spread things out. If you want to call them something else or refine the concept, I'm with you. It's probably not finished. But you're not going to get away from saying there's a fundamental truth of being able to spread things out.
You can't actually hold these two positions. They're fundamentally incompatible. Believing in the binary, as we've discussed, and the informational nature and the continuum, I don't see how
Interesting. Of course you can, but wait, because the bits are next to each other. I'm saying preserve locality, and the fact that bits have neighbors is the field concept, right? You can have a discrete field. Like Wolfram thinks there's a discretized field. You can have that, and it's still a field because the cells have neighbors. Now, you can have spooky action at a distance, and you consider space folded.
We both agree we can have discrete.
The pixels have neighbors. We talk about this part, the neighbors. The idea that there's neighborhoods is the field concept.
No. Continuity. I'll rephrase the criticism. You can't simultaneously hold the information binary nature of fields and digital nature, discrete nature of fields, and have continuity at the same time.
Right. Well,
I don't understand
Well, I would give on continuity and say that the first thing I'm adopting in that I am less likely to give up would be this neighborhood issue. We have to have a way of deciding that you're to the left and you're to the right. You know, there's a distribution, and to me, the concept of distribution is, you know, inherent in fields. So that's my advocacy of fields, is really from this concept of being able to define that, you know, I'm on one side of dude and you're on the other side of dude. That's
you remember that I said there was another fundamental problem with fields I have, and it's come to me now, and it relates to kind of in Mendham's work, where he has the idea that gravity isn't a gravity field, but is a result of all these collision contacts. There's been a relatively recent development in theoretical physics in that somebody has reproduced the Einstein general relativity equations based from an entropic point of view, and I think there's a close analogy between Mendham's photonic pressure gravity and the idea of not a gravity field, but an entropy, informational pressure, that pushing pressure, which causes gravity to be felt. And so what the question is, and the criticism is, because there are other examples, what does it mean when you say we have an electric field, and then somebody says, actually, the electric field is just a phenomenon. Sorry, we have a magnetic field. We have a magnetic field, and we have an electric field, and light is the wobbling of the magnetic field in this plane, and the electric field in this plane, and then somebody else comes along and says, well, actually, the magnetic field is just a relativistic, and this is a known physics.
Yeah, real thing, right? Yeah, it's been
proven. So now, in the swipe of, so I've given two examples. In the swipe of, the stroke of a pen, with a logical insight, we've said actually there needn't be a gravity field. Actually, there might not be a magnetic field.
Yeah,
so these fields are very often prone to being rubbed out. There was
but you got to face the quantum field, this so-called probability field. That one does not look prone to being wiped out. It looks like the field that explains the rest of these fields and their behavior are what we would call a temperature field, where, I'm calculating, it's not really fundamental. But this quantum probability field does not seem subject to your elimination
paradigm. I'll say to you about the quantum probability, that is a huge thing. About the quantum probability fields, about probability, do you think you can actually have a probability or a meaningful sense of probability without mechanism?
Well, I mean, the probability has to be built into the mechanism, but just to make clear, I mean, one thing I accept...
There has to be a mechanism to yield the probability, is my position.
Yeah, they'd be totally unified, and it'd be some sort of phenomena you could call a mechanism or a probability. But it doesn't mean that there isn't something that we consider probabilistic, that it's random but not really random. Like most people think a random of anything could happen. Well, no, it's not random. It's like you roll the dice and one of 12 things happens.
There's a mechanism.
One of 12 or 36, depending how you count.
There's a mechanism.
Really, and I do believe in mechanism. It's just that, look, mechanism isn't like a watch. That's what we've learned. Mechanism is more like fluid dynamics than it is like the dynamics of a gear. And that's a huge thing, because the math is all different, and basically we're saying, look, everything's more like fluid dynamics, aerodynamics, than it is like how a watch works.
You once said that you imagined the mathematics, the probabilities arising from kind of a platonic dice of purist, you know, no, and it's, and let's say I was to say go along that, it's a nice idea, and it's a long time ago you said it, I remember it striking me and wrestling with the idea, and that would really mean, if let's just say, I'd be happy to say, okay, as long as we accept that there's a mechanism, and then I say, where's the platonic dice? How is it rolled? And I say it's equivalent to saying God really does play dice for every particle or field wobble or whatever. What you're saying is, somewhere, some computer, some mechanism does the roll of the dice, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but what I'm saying is recognise the proposition of that. Seems, and it's most disagreeable. It seems hard to.
Well, what's disagreeable about it? I don't.
Well, it's got the.
Wait a second. We know that the end result is the physics we see in the world around us, right? Niagara Falls is going to continue to fall. Boom. We know that. That's a boundary condition. So what could possibly be a worry if this is how that adds up?
Yeah, no, because we're trying to, because we can't, for definite, come up with, you know, the intractability of physics, as I put it. What we're doing is philosophically reasoning what the possibilities are, of what the nature of those possibilities are, that we're prepared to wrestle with. And one is, if infinite things have to happen, if the electron has to go through infinite paths, actually, well, I'm going to philosophically reject that. I know the maths gives it me, but I understand the maths and how the maths.
But why couldn't it? Why can't the? But wait, why? You're assuming the photon is the photon. Why can't the photon be this ripples in the quantum universe? And why can't, at relativistic speeds of a light speed, time stop, and a photon thus have, sorry, it sounds simple when you put it this way, because it is simple maybe, that time is stopped, that photon can bounce around the whole universe and finally hit your photographic paper.
No reason.
Why not?
There's no reason why.
Yeah, exactly, because time just has to be really weird.
No.
Haven't we got some hints that time is really weird?
No. I'm just
time
telling
has
you.
to give.
No, you're right. You're right. There's no reason. Have you lost audio again? You've lost audio.
No, he muted me again.
Who did?
Truth Quest.
I can mute people? You can mute.
I guess so.
What?
Fair enough. That's probably good. Okay. Well, you better watch out what you fucking say. Great text. I'm going to mute you.
Anyway, I was saying, you're right. There's no reason except prejudice that I think that's unpalatable. Yeah, when there are other ideas that I have that are far more. It's like the Gödel business for me in choosing consistency over. I'm not going to accept. It is a prejudice, and I find, yeah, ultimately it's our own prejudices about what philosophically is we're going to allow on the table, and I don't think moving forward we're really going to ever be happy to.
Well, let's talk about this. Okay, we're talking about fields, we're talking about separation in space. I can actually imagine that that's artificial or an illusion because of quantum tunneling and other things that all hint to that. But what about time?
Yeah.
I mean, how can you get rid of the concept that something that happened 5 seconds ago is separated, even if it happens in the same place, from something that happens now? They're connected as well, but I mean, they're pretty freaking separated. So this is this concept, again, of locality and its inescapability, right? There's no way that, even if time is an illusion, that it's not true that those events are separated.
Yeah. Time to me is the most simple concept. I think from Cartesian reasoning we can say, you know, we exist and stuff exists, and that physics is the updating of the configuration of that. Time is only the recognition that it's sequential, that one followed the other.
Right.
And that's it. And from the point of computing processes, in a way, you and I have this as a very plausible and compatible idea for me, that time does stop, because if you suspend the processing of us, it's like you can move around freely in the room. If you don't update our configuration, you can go do what you want and then press unpause.
Yeah, the information.
And computer systems, I've made this hypothesis, that computer systems are a great example of the fact that certain subsystems are running at a completely different clock frequency. So between its update and this other update, it appears to this subsystem that time stopped and you got to do loads of shit before it came back and serviced this interrupt, module. Right. So yeah, there's no reason except just prejudices and what I find agreeable and what you don't. But
well, if the universe is information, then basically we have this same thing we deal with in math and science, which is, hey, I have 4 free variables. I can plot a 2-dimensional plot with any of those 2 being free and fixing the other one and get a slide. You know what I mean? It's like I have this freedom to plot the, there really are however many dimensions there are free variables. And it's not just us thinking of that as dimensions. No, it really is. And probably everything happens at one instant if you look at it on one, 12-dimensional piece of graph paper.
Going back to the information concept, it kind of answers one of the problems that about particle physics is that they're all treated as perfect replicas. Yeah, it's like if you were to consider the problem.
Like there's only one electron.
Yeah, and that's right. I checked it up earlier, and there was a guy asking, well, how can you do that? And it was Wheeler who then went away and said, yeah, what if there was only one electron? Well, that's like saying there's just one bit, isn't it, really?
I like that idea, because if something is, I believe in this concept of everything distinct is unique. I mean, I just intuitively believe that. Like our thumbprints look similar, but they're all unique. So if you apply that to the fundamental particles, yeah, you get Wheeler's idea that, okay, somehow this one thing appears more than one place. It still makes more sense to think of it as one thing, because otherwise how come its magnetic field is exactly always the same, and so on and so forth?
But I think the most intuitive recognition of that in reality is to think about information processing. Yeah. Because naturally, whenever you think about information processing, as you've said, there is a preference in the theory to binary, and then you get, well, yeah, you've only got one thing. You've either got it or you've not got it. It's the one thing, and it's always the same. You can architect the what's the word? The structure, like arrays and how many dimensions and stuff. You can implement all different structures with this one thing, but yeah. So,
well, I mean, my impression from going to this physics, in college, is that the scientists right now basically accept this idea. They don't push it. They're not talking about the philosophical idea, but there's some element of there is this location. It is an electron. That's why we see multiple electrons. That's why it's copied. That's not even their problem. Their issue is like, okay, we accept that. We want to see that the electron is really the same as the proton as well. They want to see that there really is one thing and it's a quark, and all its different modes create the different things in the same way that all the stuff we see is from just, a few dozen elements.
That's what they want to see. He's trying to say, like, everything's a photon, right?
Yeah, no, and I agree with that idea. His whole little bit, it's very much a poem to me. But as a poem, I would agree with it. Like his idea that, hey, everything must really be moving at light speed, but it's going in a circle, so it looks like it's not. That's pretty much what I think. When you have E equals mc squared, yeah, everything's still energy somehow. It's just wrapped up in some little, The problem I have with him is that he wants to call Feynman an asshole and ignore all the mathematics that describes that situation, which is like, no, dude, you've got to acknowledge the mathematics of this situation by your predecessors and stand on their shoulders. And if you don't do that, then I can't take you seriously because science is at that level of quality now. Just, you know,
I think he's got some really imaginative, productive insights that may well be have some truth to them. I think there's a problem with the lack of maths, but we know that he's not.
But he does. You know what?
It's not necessarily a problem. You know, like someone that's not all boggled down with maths might see something and come up with an idea that those of us that are like so constrained by the math.
Yeah, no, and some little philosophical truth. But, you know, frankly, it pisses me off enough to not really look the other way that he's going to also go and call Susskind and Feynman and all these people idiots, and not just idiots, but liars, like they misrepresented data that was before them. Fuck you. They are some of the best people we have in the history of mankind, separate from science, as human beings that faced reality, admitted their mistakes, and everything else. And to just malign them is, in that way, is ridiculous, because every one of those people is ready to be bested. Every one of them knows that some young kid 200 years later is going to blow their theory out of the water. They assumed that. By the time Einstein was around, they knew that. They were working on it, and they were training students and hoping they would do that. So fuck him for saying that they're liars. It's just a fucking fad. That's not acceptable. That's too far.
Why do you get so, you've said this before. Why do you get so annoyed?
Okay, we have kids in the house. I'm not supposed to cuss so much.
I wanted to ask about Hythloday's toy. When he was running around his apartment, he had this plasma ball, right? And it's got lightning bolts shooting all around, kind of uniformly all over the glass ball. And he puts his finger on it, and a lightning bolt shoots to his finger, right? And then the heat in the ball like makes the lightning bolt go up, and then it instantly drops back down, right? And it seems to go faster than light. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems to be like it's up here, and then instantly it's down here again, right? You know what I'm saying? Like it ceases to be up here, and now there's a new one down here. And it kind of seemed to remind me of like electrons going around an atom, and they let off a photon, and they go to a smaller state on the atom, and they kind of miss all the space in between. And I'm wondering if maybe it's like it's a new electron as opposed to moving electron.
It's a re-establishment of the current, I think. I mean, what's happening is once it reaches a certain length, it just stops conducting that way and reconducts that way. The appearance of the same thing jumping at infinite speed or whatever is kind of an optical illusion.
It actually
That's what I'm saying about the electrons, though, is that like an electron around an atom, and then it jumps down to a different spot.
Before I forget, I just wanted to ask, finish on Pyro, why you get so annoyed at Mendham? I mean, for this aspect. I mean, I love Feynman and Susskind and all these ancient theories, but you really get real bee in your bonnet of anger about.
Part of it is that maybe I have still a hero complex, or I'm a little boy about it. I mean, I have respect for those people. I don't think they were perfect people, but one thing I do respect is their honesty. And like in Feynman's case, you know, his honesty to be searching out where he was wrong just as much as where he was right. Now, he was egotistical, he was trying to be right, and the guy got to be right a lot, but it didn't mean that he didn't see, he's the guy that talked about, we don't really understand it. We're trying to understand it. Whatever it is, I'm willing to understand it. Whatever it is. It doesn't matter, do I like that things are this way? I'm beyond even worrying about if I like it. I just want to know how they are. And, you know, and so it's sort of to malign that is like, to me, it's a part of where Mendham goes wrong, because I give him credit for creating these conversations and stuff, but he's like, he should be endorsing this cultural phenomena of people like Feynman being so honest, and instead he's calling them liars just because he disagrees. Why couldn't he call them? He could even call them idiots, or he could call them wrong, or he could call them, hey, he was working in the 50s and he didn't know what I know.
You got to let that anger go. I think it's, I don't know.
No, I disagree. I think it's one of these things where I don't have a real anger about it, but it's like we were talking about where, sure, people look at you talking to the anti-NATOs sometimes and go, oh, why are you even getting upset? Don't worry about it. It's like, well, no, because I actually care about this issue. This is one of those issues. I think that we don't need to have hero worship in our life. Everybody should be made mortal. But to malign Feynman as like lying or any of this stuff about there's like you could say in psychology that all the psychologists in a certain generation believe something, it's bullshit, and they push it on others. That's not going on in physics for the last 100 or even 200 years. And people should acknowledge it because it's a good lesson for the rest of humanity that for all of their mistakes, the physicists have actually accepted evidence when it was put before them. They're not honest, they're not lying, they're not pretending they did experiments they've never done. They might misinterpret the experiments they have done, but they're not actually out there lying, saying we did a 2-slit experiment and they've never even done one. I mean, I just can't fathom that on the cultural level. I mean, I don't think I'm very angry about it. I just think that it's worth standing up and going, bullshit. These are people that need to be applauded for that aspect of their work, even if they are wrong about this or that or the other. I mean, Einstein was wrong about quantum mechanics. I think, does it lessen my respect for him? Not a bit. I think everybody should have that, you know, and I don't have to disagree with Einstein by calling him a liar.
Well, you was angry because you were swearing and you got told off by your wife. So.
Yeah, no, I'm angry. I'm angry about it. I agree, but I'm saying that I'm consciously accepting that this is the kind of thing to show some anger about. But it's not a huge deal, and I mean, I know that they're somewhat of my heroes, and there's hero worship, and I can't expect other people to feel the same way about the people I respect. But I can still continue to respect them. And go, look, they're not perfect, but the reasons I respect them are totally in contradiction to maligning them this way. If you have a better theory than Feynman, if Feynman was around, he'd be one of the main people wanting to hear it if it really was better. And to say otherwise is kind of like, well, you know, that's too far and unnecessary. And it just shows that your theory doesn't have the kind of backing that it needs to actually confront people like Bohr or Feynman. But on the other hand, I do believe there's some grains of truth. Like I said, I think some of his interpretation, it's just kind of poetical. He's got a poetical kind of science that it's okay as far as poetry goes, but if you really want to get down to it, no, it's not going to cut the mustard.
I played a clip where Feynman talks about not being like how the Mayans had this great calculation system about predicting eclipses, and he was saying, you know, you could imagine some guy coming over and saying, I've got this idea that, you know, but he didn't have calculus and no laws of projectiles or anything, and gravity and such like, but he imagined them being balls and you know, a heliocentric, yeah, and he dismissed because he couldn't do the calculation, and he to quote him, he's going, we can calculate to so many, where's your calculation? And so I thought that was evidence that Feynman was supporting outlandish ideas and saying, you know, be careful of saying you don't have the maths and the calculation yet, but there might be something in the idea ultimately. But
yeah. You know, a tangent on that is, I think an interesting thing is we have such good mathematical analysis now, and I think we see this a little bit with string theory, that you can almost take any data set, right, any data set, with the dimensionality just being partly based on how you took the data. You might not have an orthogonal, you know, measurement space, and therefore you got 40 variables and there's really 20 degrees of freedom, but it's kind of arbitrary. And we have such good mathematics that you can almost come up, imagine, like with machine learning, this is kind of how machine learning works, that you can come up with a mathematical model that'll fit the data you've had. Now, will it fit the data you're going to get? Maybe no, by definition it won't. But guess what? When you actually do it in practice, yeah, after you get a statistical sample, it'll keep fitting the data if it's similar. And so, yeah, and so that's an interesting thing, because basically this means we have the power to create these mathematical models entirely arbitrary and them to be arbitrarily accurate. And that's like the kind of problem you want to have, right? As a human race, it's like, I think I'm pretty glad that I can do a polynomial fit to even random data. I feel pretty good about that. You know what I mean? And yet it also means that suddenly making a mathematical model doesn't mean there's any ontological reality to it. So, for example, fields could be a mathematical creation that's silly. And the only reason I don't believe so is because of this idea of locality and separation. It has to be preserved, and right now, as far as I'm concerned, it's preserved in the concept of fields. So, but in reality, you have things like string theory that are in lots of kind of trouble, because, yeah, you can just reverse engineer how those numbers came to be, come up with a model, test the model, it fits all of the scientific prediction and post-diction and all of that, and yet it's just because you're so good at math. And the universe is consistent, so suddenly you got it consistent, you still don't understand what's going on, but you can fly to the moon, and that's good enough type thing. So, hey, you know what? This is coming on 3 hours, so I think I'm going to wrap up it.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, but I was just going to say that you kind of like that idea, this interactability and stuff, but it rather frustrates me, you know.
No, you're right. I'm lucky, because I like discovering that the universe has this incoherent.
It's a little bit. I mean, I like the beauty and I like the awe of it, and the mathematical equivalence of models and such forth. But in terms of and it's nice and beautiful from a mathematical perspective, but from the scientific ambitions of getting definitive answers, it's a little bit deflating.
Well, but see, yeah, you and I are different in that, because no, I've come to this place or was born into it where, to me, it's good news. Because it means we don't have to have 100% accuracy to say, well, at the moment, I think this is probably the case. You know, we have to work in that framework, and to me, that's good, because we're forced to work in it, so suddenly it's fitting rather than an abuse. But I understand where you're coming from. I mean, I'm the kind of guy, I like to calculate and figure stuff out. So believe me, I personally, emotionally understand that there's something unsettling, that there's a limit to that. But I kind of feel like, well, there's not a limit. Just because at the bottom God's rolling some dice, it's pretty low down at the bottom. Most things you could just calculate and figure out and predict. So who cares if the electron is a die, when in reality I can get electricity from the power station in my house and have lights to talk to you. You know what I mean? So, okay, anyway, I didn't mean to take the final say. But
I just want to say thanks, you guys. I had a really good time hanging out, and
all right, thanks
it was
for
really
coming in.
Yeah,
And I want to thank Graytex too for showing up. That's cool. He's funny live in the sense that he's not as he doesn't want to interject and take over or say anything. You almost would have to trick out of him his opinions live compared to his videos where he's so straightforward. So yeah, we'll have to get him in. I'm glad he showed up. Thanks, Graytex, for showing up if you're watching the replay. So, all right. Hey, thanks, Hythloday. Let's do it regularly. I think maybe Sunday would be a day if we're going to try to actually get me to commit to a regular time. Probably a Sunday afternoon kind of or evening kind of thing.
All right. But maybe not weekly, because I wouldn't want to commit to that, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe once a month, like you were saying, might be reasonable.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, let's try it. Let's keep thinking about it. I'm not committed, but I like the idea. I had fun. It's good talking to you. These are interesting range of subjects. So
the close button, X close.
That's the idea. All right. Peace, all. Cheers.
Gary, no! Gary, no! It's all good. Here again. Chiming in. Chiming in. Chiming in as usual. Chiming in. As usual. Get it down. Right, ugly tissue again. Sorry about that. Look, get it on, as I've always said. If you cannot be with the one you love, love the one you're with. No, listen to me. People say, oh, Glatex, you're no intelligent. They say Glatex, use is no intelligent. I say, I am intelligent. I am very intelligent. Listen, Gary Doll, I understand psychology. I put the fucking S in psychology, Gary Doll. Gary Doll. Gary Doll. People do not realise, Gary Doll, that all Glatex, I'm a thinker. Get your head around that one, Gary. I'm a thinker. Well, I'm a stinker. People seem to think, Gary Doll, that Glatex is some kind of intellectual black fucking hole. Any rational information that gets past my fucking event horizon is instantly squashed to the size of a small garden fucking. I need help, Gavin. I need help. Oh, you've got the body of a fucking Adonis. How do you do it? Let me tell you, people come up to me in the fucking street and say, Glatex, yous must be taking anabolics. No, I've done a